Check, sound check, test.
Hey, Ryan. These days. Very good. Thank you, everyone. This is a work session for the town council and a chance to talk to Matt Yamashita from Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Matt's having an exciting summer. We see him in all sorts of interesting contexts. Most recently, looks like he was perfecting his bear wrestling skills somewhere up on Independence Pass in that vicinity. So we have an opportunity to talk to him about, I guess, a broad array of topics. what's going on with Lake Christine and where we are with the shooting range, I would imagine. And and then we have a new entry provision for use of the state wildlife area, and I presume the shooting range as well. So don't think we have a formal agenda, Matt, but the floor is yours if you want to tee this up, or Ryan, whoever wants to run this has the floor.
Mayor, I think you've touched on it, and I think the main thrust tonight was to talk about the new access requirements and the need for a hunting and fishing license on the state lands. And there have been also changes up at the Lake Christine area. So if there's questions about that, I'm sure Matt could address those. But we can let him kind of give us that background on the latest rulemaking by the State Wildlife Commission and sort of the thoughts behind that and what that requires of folks wanting to access those areas.
Before we start, Matt, would it be helpful to you to just get we're not going to do people's bios and high school grade point averages, but basically just so you can associate a name with the face of our new council?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I do know some of the council members, but there's a few new faces. So if you don't mind, I'd appreciate an introduction.
Do you have your computer on gallery view? Can you see all these faces?
I can.
Okay. So Glenn Drummond.
How's it going?
Elected. Elise Hotel.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Where are you? You're up on Independence Pass. That looks like Mountain Boy Gulch there. That looks pretty cool.
No, I'm hiking to Crested Butte.
Oh, that's great. Gary Tenenbaum, I don't know if that's a fake background or whether you're up at Seven Castles or somewhere.
It's North Star. It's the Beaver Dam up in North Star. I put it on purpose for Matt.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Not bad. David,
nice to meet you, Matt.
David Knight. I don't know if you've met David.
Hey, yeah, I'm in my basement. So.
Yeah. Ryan Slack.
In my family room.
He's
No
got
special background.
Looks like he's got a Hunter Thompson poster on the wall. Yeah. That's pretty. That's another collector item there.
Just trying to bring freak power back to Basalt.
All right. So anybody else? I think you know everybody else. Greg, Jeff, Christy. Cool. So that's our team, and we appreciate you talking to us tonight.
Thanks, Mayor. Council members, thanks for having me. I had been meeting with Ryan, trying to get CPW and Basalt on a fairly routine schedule of just keeping each other in the loop, making sure that we're all a part of the conversation, and that if there's things going on, as a significant neighbor to the town on the north side, wanted to make sure that town was aware of what's going on lands adjacent to Basalt, and then vice versa. If there's things that are coming up of interest within town regarding state lands on the north side, that we'd like to be able to provide answers, help facilitate conversations. So Ryan and I had been doing that, and then COVID decided to interfere with our plans, and we haven't been as routine about it. But I did ask Ryan if there was a chance for myself to get in front of council, just to give you guys an update. We have a lot of things, and instead of relying on your ability to read the newspaper, I wanted to make sure that we took the middleman out and had a chance to have conversation just as in person as we can have these days, but in person, for lack of a better phrase, and just provide you guys with the opportunity to ask questions, get some answers, and then also, like Ryan had mentioned, we have a fairly new regulatory change that I wanted to make sure to put on your plates, and to see if there's ways to facilitate reaching the greater public. There's a lot of residents of town that live adjacent to the state wildlife area that this would pertain to. So I think if that's okay, we'll just start there and just let you guys know that as of July 1st, the Parks and Wildlife Commission, which is our governing entity, they voted to implement a new regulation, which requires a hunting or fishing license for anybody that is accessing a state wildlife area. This is a regulation that's not specific to Basalt State Wildlife Area. This is a statewide regulation, and this applies for all state wildlife areas in the state of Colorado and most of our state trust land parcels. The premise behind this regulatory change was that a lot of these state properties, like most public lands in the state, have seen kind of an exponential increase in use. A lot of the increase in use has been coming from the non-consumptive public, which is referenced as the sporting public, the non-hunting, non-fishing public. Our primary operating funds come from license sales, which are hunting and fishing licenses, and a lot of the use has been coming from folks that aren't hunters or fishermen. There's still an expense, a cost associated with use of these properties, with maintenance of the properties. And the big underlying portion is that purchase of those properties was primarily driven by federal funds that are tied to license purchases. So whenever they purchase licenses and people buy hunting equipment or fishing equipment, the federal dollars, the taxes that are associated with the purchase of that equipment are used to generate purchase of these properties. On that basis, they were looking toward, the mandate for state wildlife areas is to conserve wildlife habitat, manage for wildlife populations, and for wildlife-related recreation. They saw that a lot of the properties, we were getting away from fulfilling that objective, and so they wanted to at least ensure that we had the funding sources associated to maintaining that and hopefully getting us back towards managing towards those objectives. Locally here, Basalt State Wildlife Area plays a significant part of hosting a winter range habitat for deer and elk. It was purchased initially with the concept of providing relief for game damage. Historically, whenever there was a lot of ranching activity going around adjacent to the town of Basalt, we were experiencing game damage where deer and elk were coming down onto private ranches and were wreaking havoc on hayfields. We also saw a fairly significant number of deer and elk getting hit on Highway 82. And so we were trying to mitigate some of those by attracting them onto the Basalt State Wildlife Area parcel. Keep them off the roadways, keep them out of town, and keep them off of private ranches where the state was liable for those damages. We were successful. Now one of the major components is that a lot of those private ranches have since been subdivided, and we've lost a lot of that winter range habitat for the ungulate species. So this is one of those areas where a significant portion of the herds that reside on Basalt Mountain or the lower Frying Pan, the area from about Root Eye Reservoir down, that's now where they reside during the winter months as they kind of retreat down towards that Basalt State Wildlife Area and the BLM and Forest Service lands adjacent to. That complex serves as kind of the primary winter range for most of those ungulate herds. So that's kind of the premise for that. This particular license requirement pertains to anybody 18 years of age or older. Right now, there's still a lot of those gray areas in there. When the commission made the decision, they didn't want to throw a lot of caveats into the mix. They kind of wanted to just be a blanket. This will be, we're going to put this forward. There will be some tweaks and probably some addendums coming in the years to come that address some of these specific instances where maybe there's some exemptions that pertain to it. As an agency, the direction we've been given is to not really look for exemption possibilities, but to spend more of our time and effort educating the public, doing things like this, presenting to town municipalities, investing in flyers, signage, getting in front of press releases, the media, and trying to educate folks and see if we can't gain some sort of support and compliance from those avenues. So the big aspects on Basalt State Wildlife Area that this is affecting are the shooting range is one. There's a lot of folks, a lot of patrons that visit that shooting range that are not part of the hunting community. They don't standard hold hunting or fishing related licenses. They are required to purchase a hunting or fishing license. The other big one that I wanted to reach out to you specifically as a council was there are several, actually I think last count there were, it actually is measured I think in the hundreds of homeowners that are adjacent to Basalt State Wildlife Area that own parcels that their backyard is Basalt State Wildlife Area. Historically, they have, been able to access by crossing the fence. They jump over the fence and they are now on public lands. And as long as they're in compliance with the other regulations, then, the benefits of living adjacent to a state property. Now, everybody that lives adjacent there, they can still utilize that property in compliance with the other regulations. They just have to have a license. Licenses, the one we've kind of been guiding people toward is the annual fishing license. Annual fishing license is $30, the cheapest avenue of getting an annual license that allows access during the times that the property is open, which is from April 15th through the end of November, through November 30th. During the winter months, it's closed for protection of winter habitat for deer and elk, but during those spring, summer, and fall months, that's kind of the primary use. Does anybody, before I go on to anything additional, other topics, anybody have any questions? I'm sure I forgot to mention an aspect of that regulatory change.
Matt, how will enforcement occur? Is it on sort of the same basis as license checking? We have area wildlife managers checking people's licenses, or will the Roaring Fork Valley Sportsmen's Association require people to present either a fishing or hunting license before they use the range, or how will that take place? How will that work?
Thanks, Mayor. You're correct. So the primary objective for us in this initial year, from now until next summer, our strong push is going to be towards education. In education enforcement is an aspect of education for us, but we're going to be looking to not necessarily write tickets. It's going to be to inform people of what the requirements are, try to get them in compliance, and understanding where they need to go in order to be in compliance. As far as any kind of a law enforcement related effort, we have had staff on site, so our officers have been up there. We have a property technician assigned to the wildlife area, and we also have currently we have one temporary employee. We are looking to hire one or two more that will help serve as our liaisons to going and contacting the public. Most of those contacts will occur in the context of doing that while they're on site serving other functions. This past 2 weeks we've been on the property doing a lot of haying activity, and we've made several contacts, just people that are hiking up there while we've been up on our ag fields haying, and just kind of letting them know. Seems like a lot of the folks that are up there on a hiking basis and just using it as public lands to get some exercise on have already been informed of the change and are already in compliance. One of the things where we're finding an additional need for education is up on the shooting range, where there's a lot of uninformed people that we need to find avenues of reaching out further to. Before I go on, additionally too, I believe I neglected to even introduce myself to you. You guys spent time introducing yourselves. I'll give you a quick little background on me for those that don't know me already. I'm Matt Yamashita. I'm the Area Wildlife Manager for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I work out of the Glenwood Springs office. I was the District Wildlife Manager. Our agency is split into districts that manage geographic areas. We have the Carbondale District, the Glenwood Springs, the Basalt, and the Upper Roaring Fork districts in the Roaring Fork Valley here. We have officers assigned to each of those districts. I supervise them out of the Glenwood Springs office. Before I was the Area Wildlife Manager, I was the Basalt District Wildlife Manager for the previous 8 years. So been here in Basalt for about the last decade and have some fairly extensive knowledge of the town, of the wildlife area. I'm glad to still be a part of this. So sorry I neglected to do that, but.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have introduced you. Matt, do you still reside up on Toner Creek, or are you down in Glenwood now?
I'm actually here still in Basalt in city limits. Our new District Wildlife Manager is up on Toner Creek. It's another unit of our state wildlife area a few miles up the frying pan. His name's Peter Boyott.
Okay. Very good. Well, thank you for the introduction. So are you ready to field some questions, or?
Certainly, if people have questions, by all means, I can answer as many questions as people have.
You could question any answers we have as well, I would, I would guess. Anyone on council? I've got a few, but I will defer to my fellow councilors. David?
Do you guys expect a lot of additional revenues, and if so, what do you plan to do with that? I mean, it's a lot of great land. I think people are going to pay to hike on via fishing license.
That's a really good question, and I think the short answer is that we don't honestly know. It's not this. The primary purpose of implementing this regulation was not specifically to generate additional revenue. To be completely candid, I mean, it kind of served two functions. One of it was, to a certain degree, some revenue just to have additional funding sources for management of these properties that are seeing impacts that we've never seen before or haven't seen in some of those trends. The other component was on some of these properties, because the objective is to manage for wildlife habitat conservation and wildlife-related recreation, was to curtail some of the other uses on those properties. Not specific to Basalt, but there's other ones specific, that are probably more closely oriented with the Front Range communities that are, they're seeing thousands of people on those properties every day that really are displacing a lot of the hunting and fishing publics. We don't necessarily have anything on the books earmarked as far as X percentage of revenue from this will be dedicated toward anything specific. One thing that will definitely occur is some of those funds will definitely go in towards management of the properties. Part of it is maintenance. I think we as an agency have observed over the last decade or decade and a half, a lot of our infrastructure and facilities associated with these have not been maintained to the level that we would like to maintain them at. Our objective is not to necessarily turn these properties into a state park. That's got a different objective altogether, but we do want them to be usable by the public. We want to ensure that they are providing a resource and an availability, a recreational opportunity to the public. And some of the facilities haven't been kept up to the same degree that we would like, so.
Thanks, Matt.
Glenn?
This is probably not it's not really a question, but I was talking to a buddy from Wyoming, and we both discussed like BLM and CPW. You guys have a lot of land that are kind of near each other. Is there consideration of a camper permit? So like tons of people camp on BLM and then probably use the wildlife area. Is there any consideration on your guys' level of going, hey, let's require campers to have the same like $35 permit that an RV does or a boat does? That way you guys can have a revenue stream, because that seems to be the biggest problem is you guys don't have a lot of revenue when it comes to needing money to manage your different sites throughout the state.
And there has been some discussions along those lines. One of the aspects there that's a little bit different from some of our other federal land management partners are that they are specifically managing those parcels for multi-use. They are looking at managing for logging uses, for wildlife uses, for mountain biking uses, for all sorts of different varied uses in different publics. Specific to state wildlife areas, the kind of the only human use that we are looking at most of these properties is for it has to be wildlife related recreation. So it's hunting, fishing, or wildlife viewing. So outside of that, there are specific properties in this state that do receive a lot of attention from the camping public. Right now, the only camping that is allowed on Basalt State Wildlife Area is in conjunction with active hunting related activity. And so camping is actually prohibited on the property outside of a licensed hunter using it while exercising the benefits of a license. So it's nothing specific to Basalt that we're looking into. That topic did come up whenever it was being discussed with our commission, and it's something that as we move forward, this is kind of the initial step. They are looking at reevaluating and reassessing a lot of these different needs and uses on other parcels. One of the considerations is that if the non-sporting public has a greater benefit from the property than from the sportsmen out there, then maybe we repurpose that property as a state park or as something different than a state wildlife area, where those management objectives are strictly tied to wildlife-related uses.
So me and David were discussing when we were hiking up on Sunday morning, are people allowed to camp while they're hunting on that, like the Lake Christine Burns Guard?
Yes. The short answer is yes, they are. So if they are on Basalt State Wildlife Area during one of the hunting seasons and they're a licensed hunter, then yes, they are allowed to do that. That's permitted by our regulations. Outside of that, the camping is prohibited on there.
Ryan Slack, I think you had your hand up. I don't know if you're still on.
Can't hear you.
I think you're muted, Ryan.
I'm sorry, I have fat fingers. It's hard to hit all the buttons.
Okay.
Matt, I believe in your introduction, you said you guys have a part-time range employee now, and you guys are looking for a full-time range employee. Where else are we on the checklist of stuff we were partnering with on noise abatement, fire security, and as well as, I think we had new signage going up, new hours, 1 day off. I was just wondering if you could give us like a full shooting range overview.
I can definitely do that. Thanks, Councilman Slack. Before we move on to that topic, were there any other questions or comments related to the requirement of having a hunting or fishing license? Well, we can address those, and then if not, then we can definitely move on to some shooting range related issues.
Hey, Matt, I had one question. Could you give us an update on what CPW is doing overall to raise awareness from the public about because the public has no idea what your funding is all about. And so could you give an update of where CPW is at statewide to really start to update people on, where your funding come from, how you're going to be funded in the future? Because, it's going to come a time where we got to do something different to fund CPW. And so I just wanted to get an update of where you guys are at with that.
No, I appreciate that. That's a great overview and a good comment. I know not everybody is aware, and especially as Colorado continues to grow, we're losing that battle as far as people understanding us as a state agency and as a state wildlife management agency. So one of the aspects that is kind of new and we're late to the game on utilizing is social media, trying to get out there and our media crew has been working overtime on trying to produce videos and video clips, video segments, especially providing links on whenever we do press releases, those kinds of things that tie back to what our mission is as an agency, who we are. We're very unique in that we have two different sides to the agency, the park side and the wildlife side, which are funded differently, and the funds are kept separate. So even though we are one agency, we have different funding sources. So it's a unique, it's kind of a unique obstacle for us to overcome to try to relay that message and have people understand that concept. Second, another one is that we have, through the Wildlife Council, it's another entity where there's funding that gets devoted toward them. They have different campaigns that are pushed out. Currently, there used to be one where I'm sure you saw some commercials at one time. They were referencing the Hug a Hunter or Hug an Angler campaigns and talking about where the funding strings were for wildlife management in Colorado. Right now, they have another one where it's the wildlife, and it goes through and references what wildlife management in Colorado is and what it means and where it's coming from. So they've been putting those out. They have those different campaigns available in places like airports, some businesses. A lot of that it comes out in public service stuff and on commercials on TV. It's something where it's an uphill battle and an uphill struggle, but I think, you know, it's continuing to be done. It's just trying to reach the right publics and the right places. And Colorado is one of those places where we have an increasing number of transient communities where there's, you know, people aren't in the same community for 40, 50 years. And we while we might educate and relate some of that message to them 1 year, in 5 years, we have a new set of clientele that we're trying to impress that upon. So.
Gary, does that answer your question? Can we go back to Ryan Slack's question about update on, and let me tee it up a little bit for you, Matt, to maybe help. So after the fire, we, among other things, had a 6-person commission, of which I served. I was one of the participants. And the focus was on what to do with the shooting range, really. And what... after 6 months or so, basically the conclusions focused on a range of improvements within 3 areas. One was fire prevention, 2 was safety, and the 3rd was noise abatement or noise reduction. So they were the 3 goals. And there were a whole list of specific actions that were arrayed under those 3 sort of objective areas. And so Matt has been working, I know, with Scott Thompson and the fire district to implement a number of these fire breaks and fire prevention areas. So I have some thoughts, but I'd like to hold those until after you get a chance to kind of give us a quick update. I know we're going to get pressed for time here pretty soon. We're asking you to describe the universe here in 40 minutes. So if you could kind of give us a quick hit on where we are with the range improvements, that would be good.
Certainly, yeah. This is an important one, and one I wanted to make sure we touched on. So you'll note that there's been several improvements made regarding specifically the fire mitigation on site. A lot of that's been done in coordination with Roaring Fork Fire. Chief Thompson's been on site and has made some suggestions on different things. One of which recently, the biggest one of recent, has been implementing a green belt up above the shooting range. That work was started this past year. We constructed an access road that doubles as an access road for fire and also will serve as our future green belt. It traverses the hillside up above the range and connects to the access road to the power substation over back behind the wilds. That one, we currently do not have any vegetation on it. The goal is to plant fire-resistant vegetation and also have that under irrigation so that it'll catch embers and prevent them from moving up or down the hill. Our next step is to pair with the town and look at how we facilitate water to the site. We had explored looking at our water rights that we have for our ditches on site up there. We were running into some issues with the water rights that we have associated to that property are tied to the agricultural use and agricultural fields up above. We're currently looking at trying to reach out to town and see if there's any way to tap into town water supply and use that for some sort of an irrigated feed over to that strip of land there. Other improvements for this year were the installation of a security camera system. That's been installed. It's been in use and active here for about a month now, I guess. We're still learning that system. We're having to rely on the security company that implemented that in order to kind of teach us the ropes and show us, but that'll help for future enforcement purposes, specifically, and just to keep people honest. You know, if you know you're on camera, there's a certain degree of supervision that comes with that one. It is recorded. It goes to a recorded feed that can be accessed by law enforcement for any use after if needed. The last one that was kind of note this year was the implementation of there's catch basins and some berms that were installed in order to mitigate for any storm water. That came as a result of August 4th last year when there was a storm event that washed water down back behind the shooting range and caused a lot of debris flow. there were concerns regarding stormwater leaving that site. So working with Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, we proposed a management plan which has been put into place. Their ask from that was the implementation of some catch basins to help allow for any debris to settle out before it leaves the site. Those have been installed and are currently in place behind the range. Additionally, there have been some range management and upkeep protocols put in place with the club, the Roaring Fork Valley Sportsmen's Association Shooting Club, and with CPW in order to do some intermittent range cleanup in order to mitigate some of the shotgun debris that is collected on site. Those are kind of the big new ones. There's a laundry list of about 30 other projects that have been completed since 2018 in the fire. Just on the interest of time, I just wanted to touch on those new ones that are relevant for this year. If you have other specific questions or would like other answers, please ask them now, or if we run out of time, feel free to contact me. I'm sure Mayor Kane or Ryan can get you any of my information if you'd like to touch base with me later on.
Gary?
Thanks, Matt. And one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is how did I know it was done through the Wildlife Commission, but how were the hours decided upon? Because I get questions, it's like, why did they pick Wednesday as the day off, and how did they pick the hours? And so, because we asked for different hours than what were done. So could you explain that?
Good, really, really good question. So the commission was the one that was who the hours were presented to, proposed to by staff, presented to. They're the ones that authorized that regulatory change. As far as the hours that were decided, Wednesdays was kind of a unanimous vote as far as the day off, and it specifically aligned with a lot of our utilities companies that access those power lines and the telecommunications towers behind there. They have historically accessed those on Wednesdays. This just fell in line with what their existing contracts, their easement contracts, allowed for access on the site. The hours of operation, those were in conjunction with other ranges that CPW manages in the Northwest region. There are very few ranges that actually have hours associated. During our summer and winter periods, and the hours of operation fell in line with Cameo was the kind of the poster child for that one. So they were in coordination with what's being allowed over at other ranges that CPW manages.
Matt, I just have to ask you before we lose you, how are we doing relative to fixing the little retaining wall at the base of Lake Pristine dam structure? We had, I don't know if it's a truck or car ran into that thing. We've had these broken blocks kind of tumbling down. It's been an eyesore for quite a while now. Are we in the works to get that fixed, or what's the state of play there?
We are. I just had communication with our state dam engineer today, and so where we're getting hung up on things is that because it's a structure associated with a dam, they are trying to evaluate whether the integrity of that dam is contingent upon how that retaining wall exists. We've gotten some different answers. I did get confirmation. I told them that our ask right now is, while they're considering things and designing things, if we're allowed to just go and at least clean it up and make it look better than it currently looks. Yeah. And
feels like it'd be a volunteer day. You could just take some mortar and stick them back in there. It would be a much better.
Yep, we were given permission to go and clean it up and at least dress the wounds per se, figure of speak. But we're going to do that here. We'll be doing that here within the next month. And then outside of that, we're still relying on them to provide the expertise, the engineering expertise on what we are going to be required to do in order to repair it, if it is a dam integrity issue or if it's just a cosmetic fix. That it comes with different financial constraints. We were able to get some money from the person that caused the damage, the driver of the vehicle. So we have that money, those funds available to us. We'll see where that puts us, but we as an agency also would like to repair that sooner than later.
Thank you.
I think if it's okay, just before we conclude, the last thing I wanted to touch on was, I know there's been a lot of conversation regarding fire dangers. We're getting some hot, dry weather right now, and with the shooting range and with the events that occurred in 2018, just wanted to let council know that I've been in communication with both Chief Thompson for Roaring Fork Fire and sent an email to both him and Sheriff Van Beek today to try to get further guidance. We as an agency don't have any area, that's not our area of expertise, so we are relying on them to inform us as to what the best case situation is, what scenarios we need to be thinking about and considering. We'll be relying on their advice as to when we would implement any kind of closures there. Currently, Eagle County is under stage 1 fire restrictions, stage 2 if it gets to a red flag warning. And at that point, that's where when stage 2 fire restrictions go into place permanently, that's when we start looking at closing things down, and Chief Thompson has expressed interest in closing the range upon stage 2 fire restrictions. So we'll be having those discussions, but just want to make it known that we are having those discussions with the authorities that oversee that.
Very good. Thank you. Additional questions for Matt Yamashita, Ryan Slack.
Matt, thank you again for meeting with us here. Your knowledge is amazing. Do you know, I don't know if I can't remember exactly where we were doing it through, but do you know where the lead testing is at that we were all working to get?
I do. So update on that one is that the samples were collected this past spring. Those are all having to be vetted through Department of Public Health and Environment, the State Department of Health. They're the ones that are overseeing everything and signing off on it. They signed off on the plan. Samples were collected, have been sent to the lab and analyzed. Now we're waiting on the company that did the testing to take those results and put them together in a formal report. That report should be presented to us here hopefully by the end of July. They said by the end of August, definitely, we will be receiving that report. Once that happens, I'd like to try to get back in front of council and provide you with an update.
Okay. Any additional before Matt gets away? Matt, we appreciate you talking to us. This is good stuff. If we can stay in close touch and talk to one another, we're just all gonna work together better and support one another. And Basalt has been reportedly persnickety from time to time relative to the range and the fire and other issues, but you should know the community really supports the staff and the individuals, and I think you guys are held in high regard. But it's not to say we won't come after you from time to time on policy issues, but know that we really appreciate having you guys here, so thank you.
Thanks for that, Mayor. And I just wanted to make sure that, council knows that we appreciate working with you too. I mean, it may not always seem that way, and that's one of my goals, is to make sure that we open the lines of communication to where there is a constructive avenue for us to have discussions. And if things come up in the community, which they will, that we already know where to go from there, and we're not guessing. So I think this is a good step in that direction, but we'll continue that.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. So with that, we will turn to the next topic for our executive session. We have some Planning and Zoning Commission appointments. So I think Ryan or maybe Susan Filt may be presiding on this issue. Are you in charge here, Susan?
Sure. Well, we have Bill Marin and Joan Keefe, and you guys can go ahead and put your videos on now, but they're here today to talk to you guys about their P&Z reappointment. And the P&Z has a really important role in the town government. It's actually established through the town code, and the membership is established in the code. And the P&Z is responsible for preparing a master plan, and unlike most jurisdictions, both the P&Z and the town council adopt the Basalt master plan, which guides the growth and development of the town. And then the P&Z makes recommendations to the town council on land use applications. So when you guys were talking about how to do committee appointments, you generally made the decision that the committees themselves should make recommendations about who should be on the committee. But for the P&Z, you guys made an exception and indicated that you wanted to be responsible for that role. So this is the first time that you as a board are looking at appointments or reappointments. Both Bill Marin and Joan Keefe were appointed 3 years ago, and so their term is up. And so this is a time for you to really learn who is on your P&Z, to ask them questions about why they're interested in serving and what they're contributing to the community, and really for those two members also to give you any other insight that they have in terms of growth and development. Just so you know, the P&Z also, just to kind of put in a plug, you might be seeing on your advanced agendas, they're very interested in meeting with the town council, and because of COVID, we haven't been able to kind of put that together yet, but we're working on an outdoor location, maybe at Albany Park. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Bill, to kind of Mayor, to call on Bill Marin and Joan Keefe, and they can introduce themselves and provide some more background on themselves.
Great. Thanks, Susan. And let me begin by saying I'm sure we don't have nettles big enough for you guys. You have been real stalwarts in the last 3-4 years. It's not been a smooth road. You've done a great job. We appreciate the contribution that you both made to the Planning Commission and to the town, and I think we're all lucky that you were on through these trying times. So, and we're very pleased to see that you are reapplying. So, I think maybe that's maybe we'll start with Bill. We'll try to be concise and maybe just tell us, the 30-second bio and why you wanna. What possible mental condition you have that has led you to conclude that you want to re-up for this?
Yeah, well, most of you guys know me, and some of you don't, so I'll give you a brief introduction. I've been on the Planning Commission since 1998, with a brief hiatus when Bill hired me to be a special projects coordinator for the town. So I took 3 years off to do that, and I'm back, and we sheltered in the last master plan, which has been my third master plan. The second is chairman. So I've been around for a while, but this master plan we're particularly proud of, and we see it as a real visionary document, and broad reaching and support, very supportive of community goals. So I really want to stay on and work towards some of the implementation of this master plan, which we are particularly proud of. In there, number one goal would be affordable housing. Then after that, pedestrian and non-vehicular connections throughout Basalt. A particular concern of mine is transit. I'm a heavy transit user, and how that works inter-Basalt and inter-Valley is very important to me. And also, as is downtown vitality, something we've struggled with for decades. That's where I'm coming from.
Right. Any questions of Bill before we turn the floor to Joan? Questions, comments, any other questions about his sanity, mental fitness to serve? Bill and I go back a good number of years. So, Joan, why don't you we know Joan's quite a skilled landscape architect and many years in the private sector running her own business. Has been a great addition to P&Z. So, why don't you tell us what your thoughts are and why you want to do this?
Landscape designer. I had a small business with a staff of 20 down in South Florida. We specialize in finishing off the high-end detailed properties. I sold the company. I came out here, and about 12 years ago, I lived Aspen to Rifle, trying to explore the valley to get a feeling, and I came back to Basalt the second time and said, this is where I wanted to put a stake in the ground. After I did that, I wanted to become involved with P&Z.
Excellent. Questions of either Bill or Joan? Glenn and then Ryan.
Joan, just out of curiosity, what kind of cognac you got there behind you? That looks pretty good.
Oh, geez, you know, I can't say.
It says Louis the
That's what I
14th.
You know, we have to be careful, don't we?
Brian?
I would just like to voice my support for both of these amazing people. I actually served on P&Z with them before I joined council, and I have nothing but good things to say about both of them. They were a pleasure to work with. Just both very talented and smart individuals.
Great. That's good to hear. Other comments, questions? Whose doggy? It sounds like somebody's dog is protesting this proceeding here. I don't. Is that whether that's Bill Marin's dog or?
No, I don't have one.
Okay. Any further comment, question of these two fabulous candidates? Okay. Well, Susan, what is the procedure? We actually make this appointment now. Can we do this by motion?
You can do it by motion anytime. The only thing is actually you can't make a motion during a work session. So at this meeting or any other meeting, you can have a motion for a reappointment for both of them for 3-year terms. It would just be helpful to kind of give us an idea of what you would like to, how you'd like to proceed. I see Jeff went on, so maybe he wants to put a clarification on that one.
Okay, Jeff?
Or I think if town council has general support for these candidates, perhaps their reappointment could appear on a consent agenda calendar on a future town council meeting.
Let's do that. That sounds like a good way to go. So, thank you guys. We sincerely appreciate your service. We'll be relying on you over the next 4 years for sage advice and careful reviews, and let's have a great future together here.
Thank you very much. We'll be looking forward to working with you.
Thanks for all you guys do.
All right, thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
We excused now?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, you are.
See you all later.
So we will have take this back up again as a consent agenda item for at the July 28th meeting. So this concludes our work session. We have a few minutes before 6 o'clock to start the regular council meeting. So if you have a couple of things to take care of, we can turn our cameras off and resume at 6 o'clock. It is now on my watch 5:53, so we got about 7 minutes. So we'll get back together in a few minutes here. Thank you. Good evening, everyone that's watching in this evening. This is the July 14th meeting of the Basalt Town Council. We are just completed a work session with Colorado Parks and Wildlife and interviewees for P&Z. And I would like to order our regular meeting and begin with roll call.
Okay, let's start with Gary Tenenbaum.
Here.
Thank you, Gary. Bill Infante. Glenn Drummond.
Here.
David Knight.
Here.
Elise Hoddle.
You stay here.
She's here, she's just on mute. Okay. And Ryan Slack.
Here.
Thank you, and Bill King.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. With
And
that,
Bill?
first, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I do have a correction to the minutes when that time comes.
Okay. So if we're going to correct these minutes, I guess, Jeff, we technically have to take it off the consent agenda and amend the minutes.
No.
No? Okay. Procedurally, what do we do?
In the past, we have just corrected them and made a motion to accept them with the stated correction.
Okay.
If that's acceptable to
I think that works.
council.
Yeah. Any objections to that? Okay. Yeah, I think the correction was that Elise had recused herself on the Albany Pool discussion.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, and I counted her in that vote. So item 8E, the motion on that will change the vote from 6-0 to 5-0. Since
Okay.
Elise had recused herself and was not present.
All righty. So with that amendment, do I have a motion to approve the amended minutes as part of the consent agenda?
Mayor, I move that Town Council approve the consent agenda item as presented. Do I need to state the?
As amended.
As amended.
As amended.
Thank you, Glenn.
Second.
Thank you, Ryan.
Do we need a roll call or a voice vote on this?
Voice vote, I believe.
Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Okay, consent agenda is approved.
Thank you.
At this point in our meeting, this is a call for public comment. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes and address your comments to the mayor. Identify yourself by name and address when making comments. Comments should be courteous, civil, and constructive. Town council will make no decision nor take action except to direct the town manager. So with that, Susan Philp is managing the phones.
Sure. We
for
have,
public comment.
so anybody can still make a request for public comment. Email planning@basalt.net or text 970-987-7010 with your name and your phone number, and we will call you. We have 2 requests, one from Tony Kronberg, we'll call her first, and then Lynn Mace, and then we also got some letters on an agenda item, so I was going to enter them into the record at that time too. So I'll call Tony first.
Okay.
Oops, sorry. I dialed my own number instead of, hold it, sorry. Tony's number and my number are actually very close, so once I start dialing my number.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, Tony. You're live on
great.
Grassroots, and James getting ready to share your screen with your slides.
Okay, so first, good evening to everyone, and I just wanted to make sure that the comments that I make during the 3-minute public comment, that they should not be made when the agenda item is on. Of course, I want to talk about the pool, and I don't know if it's appropriate for me to make my comments during the pool presentation?
You can, you can make your comments now, Tony. This is, public comment period. You're limited to 3 minutes. So please confine your comments to 3 minutes. And presume you want to talk pool. Go ahead.
Okay. The reason why I say that is because when I go to other communities, we usually talk at the agenda when it's on the agenda item so that it's included in the record. So first of all, I wanted to say thank you very much for taking a look at this Albany Pool project. As you know, I still have a lot of concerns. The first thing is I want to do some housekeeping very quickly, and that is the minutes from the last meeting were very accurate as to what my comments were, and that what I wanted to do was to talk about having more public input on proposed improvements, the pool survey, design charrette. It's different from what the memo has in it tonight from the planning department. And the memo from the planning department said that I was concerned about the public noticing, that there wasn't enough time for the notice, and that was not what my concern was. My concern was actually taking the public comment. And what's happened since then is that the council directed for the resolution to go back to the post committee so that, according to the memo, so that public comment could be taken. Well, what happened was the meeting was not held on the regularly scheduled date, which is what I called in on July 8th. Instead, it was done on July 1st. So there was no public comment that was able to be given. And then the survey apparently was supposed to be conducted to take more input. And I'm not sure what happened with that, but it's my understanding the survey is still going on. And there's going to be another survey started tomorrow. And my concern with this process is the fact that, as I said at the last meeting, we're building this pool or this house one door or one room at a time, and you will hear that in tonight's presentation. It's a phased project. There's a lot of, I'm not really quite sure what's going on, but the one thing that I am very concerned about, James, okay, thank you. This is new to me, working from home from the computer. But you can see right here, the Basalt Master Plan, these are the exact words: swimming pool upgrades, year-round use, multi-generational facilities, hot tub and solar panels. The Basalt Post Master Planning, the very #1 planning principle is to seek citizen engagement in the design process. And then the goals, and the master plan was approved this year, and I think we've been working on this since 2003, but it says enhance the pool as a desirable community amenity with an inviting and well-shaded lounging area and fun water features that attract all ages. My concern with this robot pool, James, if you could pull up the next slide, please, is that we already have at the Basalt pool 2 areas that are 2 feet deep. And James, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can
Hello?
hear you. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
If you could pull up that next slide to show the pools. So we already have 2 areas that are 2 feet deep. And I can't understand why we're going to spend $500,000 to build exactly the same thing when the master plans for both the town and open space ask for multi-generational and the other things. And you can see the big pool right there where that woman is. This came from the Aspen Daily News. And that is the depth. And then the pool right below that is the little kiddie pool. And what I started, I think it was 5 years ago with a former council, to try to get a deeper warm water pool. We were trying to get a seamless pool and then a hot tub or whatever. And my whole goal has been to take that lower pool there and to make it deep enough so that we can fulfill the goals of both master plans. And if you take a look, no one's in the community from what I've read.
Tony, I've got to interrupt you.
Say again?
You've exhausted your 3 minutes, and you didn't follow the basic rules. You got to state your name, address, your residence. We will.
I apologize.
Your
can you speak into your thing, because I can't hear it that well?
Let him
Say
talk.
that again?
Your views on
What
this
was
are
that?
extremely well known. We have a duly constituted post committee. We have a planning commission. This thing has been studied to death. It's obvious that our board and commissions that are duly appointed by the town council are not in agreement with your views about a hot tub, and you're using
Wow.
this as a
Who-
lever to disrupt the process.
I have two conversations going on.
Tony, I think you need to just close down your grassroots conversation.
To what?
Just turn off your grassroots. The mayor was speaking to you.
So, Tony, would appreciate it if you would state your name and address, and then I think you've exhausted your public comment for this evening, but we would appreciate
Wow,
it for the record.
You know what? I apologize. I have two conversations going on, Bill. I have no idea what you just said. Can you hear me now?
Tony, can you hear me?
I can, Susan.
Okay, well, what the mayor was asking you to do is to state your address, your name and your address, and then he was just making a comment that you've exhausted the amount of time that you were allowed for the public comment.
Okay, so Susan, I'm talking right now. Can the people hear me right now on TV?
I think they can hear you. Yes. But you're not talking right this minute, right?
So, oh God, I can't. Susan, are you still talking to me?
No, I'm not. I was waiting for you just to indicate your address.
Okay, so for the record, my name is Toni Kronberg, and I live at 27933 Highway 82 in Old Snow, Mass, which is within a 3-mile urban growth boundary. But may I make one comment that the council can hear right now?
That's really up to the mayor.
Tony, you were,
I'm getting playback. I have no idea.
We do seem, Mayor, we do seem to have an issue right now picking up your mic. So, I think you guys can hear us, but we can't hear you.
Can the rest of the councilors hear me?
Let's get
Barely,
rid of the
Bill.
screen. Get rid of the screen share. Get rid of the
I hear you.
I hear you.
Well, let's defer this item till we get to the actual adoption. I think Tony's exhausted her 3 minutes for public comment and was going well beyond the scope of what is anticipated for public comment. So we're going to defer any further comment that she has until we take up the approval of the phase 1 improvements for the Albany pool, which is later on in the agenda. So that's a point of order.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Tony.
Just leave this. Okay. Any comments before? Any comments before we move on to the mayor and council reports?
Yeah, we have one additional call from Lynn Mace, and then we wanted to enter some letters into the record. So let me call Lynn now.
Okay, would you explain to Lynn that she has to state her name and address, go through the formalities of the public hearing here?
Sure, I'll do that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Hello, you called Lynn. Please leave a message and I'll return your call as soon as possible. Thank you so much.
At the tone, please record your message. When you've finished recording, you may hang up or press 1 for more options. To leave a callback number, press 5.
Hey Lynn, this is Susan Phelp over at the town of Basalt. This is the public comment period during the town council agenda, and you haven't picked up. Why don't you text me at 970-379-1514 if you get this message, and we'll see if there's another opportunity for you. And if you could do that right away, that would be great. Thanks, Lynn. And then the only other thing that I just wanted to kind of point out is that we had received 3 letters on correspondence regarding the Albany pool project, supporting the project, one from Sarah McMahon, Stephanie Skaluva, and Susan Poss, and so I'll enter those officially into the record. And I don't think we got any other text messages, right, Ryan? And we didn't receive any other emails from anybody else wanting to speak. So I think we're done with public comment unless Lynn texts me back, and then we'll see if there's something else we can do.
Okay. Well, okay, so with that, let's move on. And if Lynn calls back in, we could take her comments during the mayor and council reports. So, opportunity for council to report on extracurricular activities, areas of interest, observations, comments. Anyone? Reports? Yeah, Elise and David.
Let me make sure I'm off mute this time.
Yeah, you're on.
So I wanted to talk to the council about the organization Mountain Pact. I mentioned them, I think, maybe 2 meetings ago. They work at the federal level on legislation representing small mountain communities all up and down the Rockies and a little bit on the West Coast as well. They are drafting a letter to Representative Scott Tipton, and they're asking for individual municipalities to support the letter. Letter content is asking Tipton to support the Great American Outdoors Act, which I think I briefly touched on, but it is taking money from offshore oil drilling and using that money to fund now I'm blanking out on the LC. I can't think of the initials now. Hold on, I'm gonna look it up. Somebody else can talk. I'll come back.
I'm doing the same here, looking it up.
Land and Water Conservation Fund.
Thank you.
WCF.
Thank you. So the Great American Outdoors Act is essentially committing permanent funding to that fund. And the reason why this is significant for our community is that that money will go towards rehabilitation of infrastructure in national parks, but also at the state level. And I actually wanted to ask Matt about this, but we ran out of time. It will be administered through Colorado Parks and Wildlife. There will be grants available to individual communities for parks, for open space, for trails, for all kinds of fun outdoor activities. So I have already told Mountain Pact that I'm in support of this act and that they can use my name on the letter to Representative Tipton, but I wanted to see whether we as a council were interested in getting behind this. And I think Ryan has a little more information.
Yeah, so Elise had sent me the draft letter, and we've prepared it, put it on letterhead with mayor's signature, ready to be sent off. So it is a timely letter. It, I believe, needs to go out by Wednesday. They were going to do an op-ed on Wednesday, and then the letter was, they were hoping to get that sometime this week too, I believe, Elise, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
the 19th, maybe it was. And so if council's in support, essentially it would go out to them sometime tomorrow, as soon as we could get Mayor Kane's signature.
And Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, you had spoken to Aspen and they sent a letter in support, and I think some other communities as well that we're familiar with.
That's right. So Carbondale, I spoke with them today. They mentioned he wasn't certain exactly. It hadn't come before their council as of yet, but their mayor was tracking it. And then City of Aspen, they did send a letter in support. And one thing of note is that we've had at the Senate level, both Gardner and Bennett support this as well. So, it looks like it's got bipartisan support and pretty broad. So this letter would just, appeal Tipton as it needs to go back through Congress for that final approval.
Thank you. So are folks interested?
Yeah, I think that, absolutely. But I think that, for like, CPW has a formulaic, it's a line item annual budgetary anticipated revenue. I mean, they've been working with LWCF for many moons. So, it was turned off for a long time, but fortunately is back in operation. So they're all over, that fund source. So, but certainly, I think a letter would be great, and I think we ought to add our voice. Gary, I would defer to Gary too. He probably knows more than the average bear about this program.
The Land and Water Conservation Fund was used to buy North Star, so it's been in existence for a really long time. So
yeah,
the reality is it'll go through CPW and GOCO, and the reality, if we can start getting that funding and start going back into our communities, it'll be huge to do it under this administration, because if we can get potentially a different one, it'll even go further. So I'm all in support. I think it's great. Thanks, Elise, for bringing it, because we should be wholeheartedly supporting this. So I'm totally on board.
Great. Do you want any more direction than that, Ryan, to prepare a letter for us?
So the letter would be one, and then just adding our name in support of the op-ed piece. It would go, it looks like in the Durango Herald, and that's of course, down in Tipton's home area. It's from Montezuma County, but I think just kind of front and center for his attention. So both of those would be good to get direction on. Okay.
Is that what you were looking for, Elise?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, if I say that the Basalt Council as a whole is in support, that is an accurate statement. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth. And Bill Infante has already signed on, so I'm confident that he would be in support.
Great. Okay.
Tipton got primaried, so it ain't gonna matter much. But yeah, I'm in support of doing it.
Yeah, I'm in
People
support.
not in support of this. Okay.
We're good. I think I've got the direction I need. Mayor, I do have the letter prepared for you to sign. So when you come in to sign other items, you can get that one out as well.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you.
All good. So any other general council comments about community stuff? David?
Sure. Just a few things. We had Roaring Fork Conservancy Board meeting this past June 24th, and a couple of things just to report on. The River Center's still closed. Obviously, we're in drought conditions, and those continue with late monsoon, etc. One thing to point out is they're doing the hot spots for trout. So for those who are listening and interested and want to volunteer to collect temperature readings, that's an option. You can check out their website. I think from what I've seen and folks I've talked to, the Wednesday night lives have been going really well. So thanks for everybody who's been involved with that. The performances are high quality. It's been a lot of fun. And then I wanted to give a shout out to a few people in Public Works for the Swinging Bridge Trail. I was helping out on that on July 8th, and it went on July 7th and July 8th. And visit Salvador Alanda and Ryan Wessling, Tim Vogel, and Matt Wagner from Public Works. It was a really good project and a good partnership between the town, Roaring Fork Outdoor volunteers, and community. You know, Rick Stevens was helping to kind of lead that from a community perspective, and that was great. And then it was a week of volunteerism. I had the Mirabus at Bolski's on July 9th, and I don't know if people are familiar with that. You can check out Vail Health's website and see more about it, but they were providing food resources and COVID screenings over there at Bolski's, and you know, Jackie Whitsitt got a bunch of people that helped volunteer, and you know, it was a pretty efficient operation, especially when you read in the papers about testing and some of the challenges that people have with testing in other places. I was proud to kind of see us do it efficiently with Mirabus leading it. So that was cool. And then Glenn, Bill, Kane, and I were at that Tour of the Trails this weekend. I'm sure other folks will talk about that. Really informative. And again, Roaring Fork Outdoor Volunteers and the Conservancy and Colorado Wild Public Lands and ACES put on a great event. It was a lot of fun. The last thing, and I know somebody else is probably going to say it, but I'm going to kind of lead off. The fence at the river and the park is torn at this point. So we definitely, I think, need to address that in some capacity if it is there to, protect people from what's within. The barrier is broken at this point. So I think there's an opportunity here to do something with that, to, one, fix it or do something to, protect folks from dangerous things on the property, but also make it look nicer since what we've got is essentially broken. So those are my comments for today. I will yield the floor.
Great, thanks. Somebody else had their hand up. Ryan Slack did, I think. Go, Ryan.
Glenn's before me.
Oh, okay. That's a gentlemanly act. I kind of.
Thank you, Brian.
Guess I'm not surprised, but.
So I just wanted to give everybody an update. We had a Basalt Emergency Management Committee meeting on Thursday. Fire chief from Pickens County, Yuba County, both health administrators. Basically, fire danger is a big deal. Everybody kind of knows that. And from the health department side, you could deal with palatable the disappointment of our level of response when it comes to the COVID situation. From testing and everything, Birch Barron, Valerie McDonald up in Pickens County. Why we haven't gotten better deals from the national level as far as response. It's frustrating, but our case counts are still going up, and on the same token, our hospitalization levels are staying decent. So, I think it's all to be expected. So, kind of where that stands.
Great. Anyone else? Council reports, comments. Ryan Slack.
I'd just like to share just another update from RUDI. The muscle inspection program is, the team up there is awesome. I think they're up to their 11th boat fully decontaminated, with many more that they've been cleaning out that isn't considered a full decontamination. So I love that the town supports this. I think it's super important. Well, actually, all the towns and counties around us support it. So just a great operation up there, and kudos to that team for executing all summer, continuing the great operations, and an awesome resource for us in Basalt and the rest of the valley.
Great. Thanks. Anyone else? I'll just report on a couple things. We did have our monthly Rafta board meeting last Thursday, and Rafta is is solvent, despite some incredible challenges. This is an agency that did not collect fare revenue starting in first part of March, and has just within the last 2 weeks started collecting fares. Excuse me, and the system is striving to meet system demands, which are now growing pretty radically. But the agency is sticking by their plan. These 40-passenger transit buses that we see are accommodating only 15 passengers. So they're all roped off, maintaining social distancing. There are new spray curtains installed to protect the driver and riders. So all sorts of precautions going on. The system is strained. We do have a couple instances of having people left at the dock because the bus whizzes by because all 15 seats are full. But Rafta is diligently studying methods for increasing capacity, for meeting demand, and for basically getting back to more normal operations. But with current reporting both in Pitkin and Eagle County, that does not seem to be on a short time horizon. So we're going to be living with these constraints for a while. The Broomville's bus system has been surprisingly more successful than anyone would have guessed. We had to increase the ticket price to $15.95 per passenger, and my guess was that was going to kill the bus service. But when you really put it in the context of what other options people have for riding the Ash Mountain Gondola for $24 or going to the Fairy Caves or doing other things in the valley, it still shows up as quite a bargain. So long live Broomville's. The system's running well, and those guys are doing a great job working with the Forest Service and Gary, I'm sure. So congratulations to the crew that completed the trail. It was a good public-private cooperative project involving the Roaring Fork Outdoor Volunteers, Rick Stevens, and the Basalt Gives program chipped in, and everybody worked to bring this to fruition. And so we're very grateful for that. The fire hazard, it's not, COVID's not enough. We now have stage 2 fire restrictions that are just around the corner. We're operating in stage 1 now. Stage 2 is undoubtedly imminent unless we get rain very shortly. The rain prospects are looking pretty good for all of us that are studying it. We are getting some monsoonal flows. It's just showing up late afternoon now, but starting next week, it looks like we may get into a more traditional monsoon flow, and that could really help us out. So keep our fingers crossed on that one. The buskers evening, I've been out at great personal sacrifice. I've been visiting all the bars to see how the system is working, and I get home kind of late. It's the hours are long. The work is hard. A lot of concentration, a lot of conversations, a lot of different kinds of drinks. It's really not an easy task, but I've taken it on, and I can report that the energy's been good in town. It looks like it's working pretty well, really. So congratulations to all of us for the Buskers and Basalt Bucks program. COVID, it seems like, our mask ordinance is helping. We're kind of holding our own here in the Mid-Valley. We do have increasing cases in the Eagle Vale Valley and Garfield County. To a very lesser degree in Pitkin County, there's an increase, and it looks dramatic on a percentage basis, but on a real number basis, it's very few. So, I think we just need to keep on keeping on. The mask ordinance is really an important one. The social distancing has been critical, and David Knight and I had a long talk about whether we get Rob Stein to come talk to us. The number one question I hear from people in town is the school year and what that's going to look like. And it's got people really nervous and concerned, and it's for whatever decision's made, it's going to be a very difficult one. So in the interest of having us be able to inform our public, we may work with Ryan to see if we can get Rob Stein or one of the school district officials to come to maybe in a brief work session for us next time to talk about what the school year is going to look like. So that's all I had. So if there are no further comments, let's go on to the financial projection and expenditure update, which is surprising and in a cheerful way. So,
Mayor Kane, while I may be forgettable, I do have a few words under the manager's report.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
Before going there, I just, of course. Just a couple quick updates for you all. I'm going to play off of where you left off. So I did, in fact, get in touch with Rob Stein, and he's it sounds like he's willing to come and give a brief update to council on what their plans are. So that's in the works. We're just making sure we can coordinate that. We do have quite a bit of work ahead of us on the budget, and I'm going to need some time during work sessions for addressing sort of the strategic side of our budgeting, so we can make sure we're meeting council's expectations there. But I think having him come in and kind of splitting the time like we did tonight would work well. As it relates to COVID, so I was on a call, and as you alluded to, the cases in Garfield, Eagle, and Pitkin are all up. And essentially, the state is probably looking for those that have a variance to provide a mitigation plan to the state. The numbers are at the point in a 2-week rolling average that they're triggering the need to have that. And what it looks like is, from what I heard today, that there are more than 100 new cases per 100,000 people. So they take that on a sort of pro rata basis, and it looks like we're there in all 3 of the counties. That's going to be some hard work for the counties coming up. I don't think they're really trying to go and shut businesses down again. That's not the intent. It's really trying to work on the messaging and the enforcement. They're seeing that a lot of the cases, in fact, aren't coming out of businesses necessarily, but private home gatherings and things like that. And so we really need to make sure we're all doing our part, because that does put school at risk, and then therefore the economy, and that could affect the ski season as well. And so we just want to make sure that everybody knows it's not about they doing their part, it's about all of us doing our part. So I can't express that enough.
Ryan, I'm sorry, could you explain the 100 cases? Where is that? All 3 counties or Mid-Valley? What are the 100 new cases? What's the origin?
So I think it's basically spread out throughout all 3 counties. I don't think there's an identified cluster. I think what they're saying is there's now community spread again. So it's no longer just being isolated to, hey, there was something at this restaurant, or we identify this party. It's just happening, and I don't think we want to say, batten down the hatches, but I think everybody needs to be aware that, the gatherings that we are having behind closed doors are spreading the virus, and it's only going to affect, the entire community if we don't get a hold of it and cases down. Those 5 commitments to containment are extremely important. The one issue that we do continue to have, the testing, and the fact that a lot of the testing, they're getting 8 to 10 day delays in getting those results, and you cannot do the box it in strategy when you have that much of a delay. They really need to have that 48-hour turnaround. So regionally, both Pitkin County, Eagle County, Snowmass, sent a letter, and Aspen appealing to the state to come up with a statewide strategy for testing so that we can really get this under wraps. And there is still testing occurring, and they are now strategizing for not only the number of tests that they have left for very specific uses, but then also as far as where to send it to. I understand that the state lab received 5,000 tests the other day, presumably in Denver or something, and so that just completely blew up the lab, and so they started then having to send things out to the private labs who are also backed up. So we're just at a pretty critical point here, and we need to take it seriously as a community, and again, everybody needs to do their part. Even though I know we're all probably pretty darn impatient, and just feeling the drag of having to live by these rules. And a couple other lighter updates. We have our contractor out doing the short line striping at this point, so crosswalks, stop bars, all of those types of things that are finishing off the street improvements for the year. So we'll have some nice bright white lines for people to see. And let's see, we do have, thanks to Susan and BPAC, we're working on getting the box painted. So we've got that moving ahead, and we've got BPAC helping with that. That should be coming up pretty quickly. We know that summer is waning, and just trying to get all of this stuff done simultaneously, easier said than done. So we're catching up on those types of things. Sandbags. So we mentioned that monsoons could be coming. With the burn scar, we are not out of the mud and flood risk, particularly in the developments that are in the Hill District or in other sloped neighborhoods. We have completed all of the mitigation to help protect properties. That doesn't mean it's 100% foolproof. And so at the county building down in Elgibel, in the county shop, you can get sandbags and sand, and it's just a self-serve. And then just a reminder that you can certainly protect your structures, but residents just need to be cognizant that if you are pushing water onto another property, that's a no-no. You just really need to kind of keep it around the structures themselves. And then lastly, the Basalt Bucks program, we are starting to get the Basalt Bucks back. We've got 181 collected and in our hands. From some, we're hearing that they're kind of holding on to them and then going to bring them in when they get a bigger chunk. So we're encouraging them and just letting them know that we will, continually write checks and wanting to get those in. And we did have a couple fits and starts with the first round where people were not providing the receipts with them, and we had one person that was sort of flatly refusing to do that. Unfortunately, we still got them paid, but do want to just encourage folks that this is for data purposes, and just really helps us understand what the impact is. That's about it, Mayor.
Thank you. Excellent update. Thanks very much, Ryan. So with that, now we can move into presentations, and our first item is the financial projection and expenditures update. Christy.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to get that going, so we can go through this. Everybody is used to this modeling now, so I think this will be fairly quick, but if you have any questions, let me know. So the first thing I'm going to start with is actually the 8A2, which is our updated on the sales tax report. So I think that's useful because then that plays into the financial projection. So obviously it's a good place to start. But just in summary, looking at June, 17.4% increase compared to June of 2019. That's just odd. I guess is the best way to put it, given the pandemic and some of the other current situations. It's especially something that wouldn't be anticipated as part of a pandemic, but this is something that our economy is showing right now. We had a couple of strong months early in the year that actually helped us to get a 13.4% increase year to date, 396,000 year to date also. So both are looking very strong. We have pretty much a 0% increase between years in sales tax budgeted, so that is really good news for us. But it fits and starts from different sectors. Our retail food is super strong at 20.6%. Retail sales super strong at 50.4%. I believe the retail sales and some of the sporting retail and building are really the online sales as a result of the new rules at the state level. So I don't believe that a lot of those sectors have to do with the local economy, but they all play into the sales tax report. It's been possible to get those actually pieced out effectively, but in total, that's what we could talk about. Retail liquor at 46.3, and then the decline, the losers, if you will, the significant declines were, as anticipated, lodging at 52.9% for the month of June. Restaurants without bars at 40%, restaurants with bars at 10.2%. So that's what that looks like right now. Any questions on the sales tax part of this report?
A quick question on the online. Did we have a forecast number? Because that's kind of a new revenue source. What were we expecting, and how are we doing compared to that?
So that's a great question. We have not been able to effectively separate that out to even get to that type of a number. Originally, when we budgeted for 2020, the prior council had recommended that we budget a flat total revenue because the potential anticipation at that time of a recession. And so that's what we budgeted in total at that point in time, based upon just the summary or the assumption that we could get a recession, to be fairly conservative. So it was really impossible to know what those online sales were going to be. There's no data around that to be able to pull from.
Thanks, Christy.
And if I might just interject for a moment, trying to get that information and separate out online sales really is probably not possible. And the reason for that is those businesses their name doesn't necessarily correlate to what they might be known as online. So if it's Amazon, that's pretty straightforward. A lot of them are much smaller and may just be under a different business name. And then secondly, there are some of our local brick and mortar businesses that also do online sales, and so that kind of further muddies the water. So really, it's going to be sort of at a more gross level, trying to determine what those impacts are. And just to Christy's point on really trying to understand where we are with impact. I've spoken with some of our neighboring jurisdictions, and one of our Up Valley neighbors, they're down 8.5% for the same month, and so there's just really hard to predict. And from the next presentation that Christy's going to do, you can see a slide that I want to make sure we bring to your attention that just talks about countrywide what those impacts are, and really we're bucking the trend for now. And so I think we don't, we can be cautiously optimistic, but I think, we are very far from being over this, and I think we will still see some impact. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
The other, to add insult to injury as far as the, determining the online sales, a lot of the large, vendors, online vendors like Amazon as an example, came in November and December after we were done with our budgeting. So we had a couple of very strong end of the year months that were not included in our budgeting for 2020 because we had already done our revenue estimates and things like that. There was a delay in the implementation by some of these large vendors because of the magnitude scale of actually putting this into play with multiple jurisdictions, et cetera. So if there aren't any other questions, I'll go down back to our revenue modeling. And this is the reason, because of the uncertainty of a pandemic that we haven't seen in our economy for 100 years, in a completely different time than we live in right now. I think that's really the reason why we do these financial updates monthly, is so that we can start to plan for our next fiscal year based upon the results we're getting in today, have good conversation along the way, and really determine our approach as we get better and better information. And then on top of that, then that really assures that not only is everybody communicating and understanding where we're at right now, but it also makes sure that we stay in good fiscal health and are being proactive in how it's impacting the town specifically in our community. So that's the positive with this, with all these unknowns and things like that. So going into the financial modeling, the result of the sales tax collections were $100,000 higher than projected, because I did not project an increase of 17% over last year. I wouldn't have anticipated that. The prior month we saw a 6% decrease overall. And so as an example, our sporting retail saw a 46% decline in May, and then over 50% increase for June. June over June of the prior year. So that's how volatile some of our sectors are at right now. So it's been challenging, but we keep revising our projections as we get better information. So as a result of these sales tax being so high and some other more minor revenue items, I took the revenue projection from $792,000 in the red the prior month to $143 in the red. So we're almost right now on the revenue projection that we would have started the year with on the budget. So that's good news with that. Obviously we still have some work to do as far as those delayed expenses. The last council meeting, we had like a goal of adding back $600,000 in critical infrastructure and general fund expenses based upon the favorable result from the prior month. But we actually added the $465,000 back to expenditures. And a lot of that is because of conversations with department heads and making sure that we're maintaining our essential services effectively, and making sure that we're maintaining our infrastructure as well as we can. It's important to really think about those things now, because the uncertainty doesn't really just include this fiscal year. We're probably looking at 3 or 4 years of uncertainty. So it's good to be a little bit nimble with that and proactive. So that's why that had been added in, and I'll show you the summary of that in the next page. But just wanted to give you the actual numbers first, so you can kind of think on those. So right now we have $340,000 in delayed expenses that remain right now. Some of those are delayed projects that we probably won't be able to start this year now that we're getting later in the year, and others are things that we could still have a conversation on and looking at how how we roll those things, this year still, or in our 2021 budget, depending upon how, the results continue to unfold over the next couple months. So projected revenues went from 6.79 million the prior month, to 7.43 million. And sales tax was the largest part of that, went up from 4.39 million to 4.79 million. So roughly 400,000 of that increase was the sales tax estimate. Building permit fees, we're still seeing, fees coming in. So I also revised that number, year to date. And we held back a portion of the general fund transfer from the water fund to assess about the utility billing. And since then, we're looking at how our collections are going for our water utility. Is that people are basically paying their water bills. We're maybe 6,000 or 7,000 higher in our uncollected accounts or delayed accounts based upon last year to this year, same quarter. Which is not substantial. So that's good news for that. It appears that so far, people are doing fairly okay within the town. So there's that. Let's see here. And then I'll go through the CML newsletter after we go through the actual numbers. Okay. So I updated this spreadsheet to show budget versus the projection, and favorable, unfavorable. There's your numbers that I just went through. Excuse me. The 143,000 in the red so far in the revenue compared to budget, and 340 that we are anticipating to save. We'll continue to revise and update you on those numbers. So right now, based upon all of that, we're showing about a break-even projection for the year. We started at $177,000 loss anticipated from a budgetary standpoint because of the timing of the receipt of 3 police vehicles that were budgeted from last year. But right now we're right about break even, so we'll continue to modify that. Now, oh, go ahead. Does somebody have a question? 2021 and 2022 numbers here. Still, looking at a large income or loss here, assuming that we have the same expenditures, that we don't look at reducing any expenses at this point. But, we really need to dig deep into these revenue numbers here. I'm going to start that work. We're going to be putting together, we have put together a budget calendar, and Finance Advisory Board is reviewing it tomorrow night. And then we're going to bring it to council for their review on July 28th at the next council meeting. And we'll start to talk about our 2021 budget and get some better numbers on that instead of the scientific guesses that I have in this report here. It's really, a crapshoot in some ways simply because we don't know what additional closures are going to be required and what the fall is going to bring. But we just have to be nimble at this point as we're going through our budget process to do the best we can. Okay. So I'm going to go down to, so I'm not going to obviously go through all this in detail, but just as a reminder, I do look at every one of these line items and determine how much of a reduction we're anticipating for the year. Now, this sales tax, I want to note, it shows a negative reduction number. That actually means that we're looking at seeing an increase compared to budget on our sales tax. Okay, that's all that means. Property tax, I have increased compared to the last version. We were at about 10% reduction because I got an update from Eagles County saying that we received about a little over 92% of our our property tax in. Through June, and so that's really actually good news for us that most people are paying on time within the town on their property taxes. So we're only looking at 5% down versus 10%. We have to hold enough for our bond fund and our general fund here because we don't have a lot of savings in our bond fund. Okay, so something we just still need to monitor. Yeah, building permits is actually higher, than budget as well, so that's another strong point. That was not true in the last recession. Obviously, we didn't see any building or very, very little, in our 2008, 2009 recession. And comparatively with sales tax, we were down 13%, on that year. So it's pretty interesting how this one's playing out so far. Okay, let's see if there's anything else I want to note. Our interest earnings are still significantly down. It's what you would anticipate given the low interest rates, or no interest rates on our federal government. So that's the impact there. Let's see. So then we're going to go into our sales tax impacts and our financial modeling for that. As we talked about before, is that we update a percent estimate by reduction by sector, and we've modified these numbers based upon our current information. You know, retail sales, we're showing 10% up year over year because of now we were at 50% in June. 4.2% in May. I mean, so that's your range. It's very volatile right now and very difficult to put your finger on. But we're trying to just show an estimate for right now. You know, for retail food, it's been up 20% for the last 3 months. We think July will probably still be up as people are still kind of stocking up a little bit, but then we're thinking it's going to level off, but it's hard to say. But in lodging, we're hopeful that as the percentages that they can be filled increases, that obviously their reductions will decrease. So that's going to depend on that. And restaurant with and without bar, we're maintaining that at about the same percentage reduction as we had in June, hopefully just a little bit better. I'm going to go back up one page here. And then you're looking at year over year about a 2.9% increase in total sales tax, and that includes post and general funds. So, and that's different than versus budget, because like I said, we were very conservative on our budgeting, so that's even a higher percentage on our budget. That's why I added versus the budget there. See,
What happened?
We lost audio. Hey, Christy, pause. Here, one minute. I'll go run and tell her.
Do you want me to recall the number? Is that what you want?
I believe that's how we got it back on last time.
Tell me when she can go back on.
Okay, I think he's calling right now.
Shoot.
Because the mics are working, it's just actual Zoom call.
So Jan, just call me when we're back on, okay? Is the Zoom call that's off or what?
Yeah, the mics are still working.
So what happened?
This Zoom call, won't be able to trust. The mics are all still working because I can hear myself right now through the mics.
But we're not broadcasting anything.
Well, I can't hear anything right now.
I'm gonna call back in to Zoom.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
Christie's idea of 10 minutes.
Enter your participant ID followed by pound. Otherwise, just press pound to continue. Meeting now. There are 17 participants in the meeting.
Oh, good? Good to go? Okay, awesome. We're back on. So sorry for the delay on that, just to make sure the public can hear us. Okay, little tech glitch. But one thing that's really important to just keep in mind as we are looking at our financial health this year and into the future is that, like I said, we're bucking the trend. I believe that Basalt is in a rare position of seeing some sales tax increases that haven't been seen by our peers. Most of our peers are at a decrease. So that can obviously change with the nature of this thing, and the volatility that you've even seen within some of our sectors is really insane. So it's just really difficult to forecast. But if you look at this report from CML, 74% of municipalities have started to make unavoidable cuts. 20% say it's across the board. There's a lot of cities and municipal governments that are actually making cuts because of this COVID financial issue that we're seeing as a nation. And thankfully for us is that we are seeing some increases in costs because of the COVID, but for us, but we have the CARES Act funding that's coming that is going to be able to cover hopefully most, if not all of that. But they're looking. I mean, there's a lot of municipal governments that are looking at furloughing and laying off employees and hiring freezes. So it's it's just a real tough world out there right now until people start to figure out what's going to happen over the next couple of years and the longer term implications. A lot of times, recessions with municipal governments are after the initial recession. We kind of are a lagging indicator of a recession that's impending, and so it'll probably take somewhere around 2 to 3 years to see the full impact of what this thing could look like. I think it says, over the next 3 years is what was quoted in the CML article. But anyway, I encourage you to look at this in a little more detail on your own time. But does anybody have any questions on the report?
Just keep those numbers up, Christy. Just.
Yeah. If I had a crystal ball, I would make sure to use it. And if I had an ability to keep the numbers running, I would. But I can give you the numbers that I get.
Christy, seeing that 70% of cities have not received CARES funding, I just wanted to say thank you to you and to Picken and Eagle County for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're great partners, and Ryan has done a good job working with them, and they've really, both counties have done a great job of making it really easy for us to kind of work off the coattails of the hard and diligent work that they've put in making this a reality. So, well put.
Thanks, Christy. That was great.
All right, thanks, Christy. Any questions for Christy Chacoin? Chacoin, yeah. I thought it was pronounced She of Coin was the
That's right.
Finance director, but I think we'll stick with Chacoin. So, hearing no thanks for that report. 17% is pretty impressive, and hopefully we'll save that advisedly. So, the next items up are council actions. Item 9A on the agenda is a public hearing and second reading of ordinance number 13, series of 2020. It's an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Basalt, Colorado, granting site plan approval, Southside floodplain Reach 2 ESA review approval, community housing review approval and a license agreement for an automated car wash located at 115 Southside Drive, Lot 1 of the Basalt Business Center West Subdivision, Basalt, Colorado. James.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. We do have John Belkin, who is representing the applicant group here this evening as well. This is a public hearing and second reading of an ordinance that would approve of a site plan review, Southside Reach 2 floodplain environmentally sensitive area review, community housing review to pay cash in lieu of affordable housing, and then a license agreement for landscaping in the right-of-way on an application submitted by the Van Ruin Group to construct a one-bay automated car wash on the vacant property at 115 Southside Drive, which is located in the Basalt Business Center West PUD. The site, as described at the last meeting, is a vacant lot of just over 1 acre. It's located on the corner of West Cody Lane and Southside Drive, as you can see on your screen. Let me move this over. Here is West Cody Lane, here is Southside Drive, and here is the subject property. Across the street is Big O Tires and Basalt Quick Lube. There's also a ditch that the applicant is proposing to pipe. It's on the eastern extent of the property. And then the proposal, as was described at the last meeting, is to construct a one-bay automated car wash, as you can see on this site plan. The applicant is proposing to have entryways off of West Cody Lane in this location, as well as another entryway on the Southside Drive area located here. This is proposed to be a bailout lane for people to get out of line that are waiting for the car wash. The applicant is also proposing a parking area on the south side of the structure, and it's proposed to have vacuum stations, as you see in most car washes. They're also proposing to sell a strip of land adjacent to Southside Drive to the town, so that 21 head-in direct parking spaces can be provided, as there's been a parking problem in the area for quite some time. At the last meeting, staff went over discussion items that staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission had reviewed and analyzed. Those items included consistency with the PUD, consistency with the master plan, consistency with the character of the industrial park in which it's located, which P&Z generally found the application consistent with these items. Staff also discussed at the last meeting that the town's hydrologist, Robert Crable of Matrix Design, found that the proposal will not increase the base flood elevation on adjacent properties, as is required by the ESA review. Staff also went over the proposed traffic mitigation techniques that include contribution to the Basalt Avenue Cody Lane roundabout, as well as proposal to open the car wash later in the mornings so as not to impact the school traffic. Council approved the ordinance on first reading at the last meeting and directed staff to work on the options for purchasing the right-of-way for construction of the head-in parking. As noted at the last meeting, the applicant was proposing to sell this area of the property to the town for right-of-way to make the head-in parking work. They were proposing that the town buy the land for $28 per square foot, which would have included a total of $104,000 for the land, and to provide $54,000 for the construction of the spaces, since the car wash isn't going to be impacting the on-street parking, as they have their own parking. But as was discussed at the last meeting, staff thought that it was appropriate that the town only pay for the net increase in spaces, which was number 3 in the alternatives that were there last meeting. And so that equaled $23,000 for the actual right-of-way, and then $54,000 for the construction of the spaces. Since that last meeting, staff reached out to the Basalt Business Center West Owners Association, as well as Big O Tires, Basalt Quick Lube, and the Finishing Touch, to get an understanding of what kind of contribution those entities would make towards the parking. Big O and Basalt Quick Lube indicated that they would be willing to lease the use of 7 of the spaces each at a cost of $250 per month. And they actually indicated that they were willing to lease more of the spaces if the town allowed at a bit larger rate, so that the town could recoup a good deal of the cost that the town would put into constructing those spaces, and the cost would come back over time. The Basalt Business Center West Owners Association declined to contribute to the parking, and Finishing Touch indicated that they don't really use those parking spaces except the parking spaces that are directly in front of their business. So staff came up with 2 revised alternatives that were in your packet. There's Alternative A, in which the town would front the $77,000 and get paid back over time through renewable leases with Big O and Basalt Quick Lube. And that's what is shown on your screen now. And then there's an Alternative B that was in your packet, which the town would lease to purchase the land over a 5-year period, and then get paid back through the leases of the parking to Big O and Quick Lube. Staff was actually supportive of Alternative A. We think it is a cleaner administrative scenario for the town. Also of note, staff amended the ordinance since first reading to require an easement for the potential for future sidewalk along Southside Drive, rather than making it right-of-way, as was in the first reading ordinance. So in total, P&Z and the Basalt Affordable Community Housing Committee, which is BAC, recommended approval of the ordinances. Staff recommends that council take applicant comments, take public comments, and then provide council discussion. If you're comfortable, you could approve the ordinance. On the parking alternative, if council agrees to one of those alternatives, council could identify which one, and you could add the corresponding condition that goes with that alternative, which was in the document that Pam Schilling sent out to the council earlier today, with a couple minor adjustments to the conditions. With that, staff would suggest turning it over to John Belkin, the applicant, to see if he's got comments.
John, you got the mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, good. That worked well.
We received a pretty thorough presentation last time, so
yeah.
Please keep your comments.
Yeah, just a couple things. I have one comment and one question. James and I exchanged some incremental comments. We just haven't gotten this on Friday. Assuming, James, those are what we exchanged in the email are incorporated in here. That this looks good. I have 2 comments. Alternative B poses some challenges for our lender. I mean, we're going to be going to more than likely a local bank for financing for construction of the site, and also for equipment purchase, and also some startup money. So they were concerned about Alternative B with a lease purchase arrangement. I just want to point that out. And then I just have a question for James, which is the easement, the 5-foot easement, that's the same width that we had discussed previously with our engineer, I think, right?
That's correct.
Because meaning it's not more, because if it's not more, our site won't work. If it's more than that, we don't have enough room to make it work. Is that correct?
It's not more, so it's the same that we had discussed previously.
Okay. Yes. That Yancey had proposed. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's it. Hoping we can have this Mid-Valley here. So, thank you.
So with that, staff would suggest taking public comment because it's a public hearing.
All right, James. Since it's a public hearing, I will open the public hearing at 7:25 p.m. And I think James and Susan will arrange for people that want to call in to address the council.
Okay, and just as a reminder to the public, we've started our clock, and if you would like to speak, please email planning@basalt.net or text 970-987-7010 with your name and phone number. And we'll close the public comment when my buzzer goes off that we provided a 2-minute time slot here. I didn't receive any texts or emails prior to the meeting that anyone wanted to speak.
Additionally, staff has not received any correspondence either from the public since the first reading.
Okay. So let us know, Susan, when the
Yes,
time's
I'm
up.
watching. This is like when I'm doing my interval times when I'm racing. That that minute seems to go really slow.
Good. It's good to know. Okay.
Okay, I think we're good.
All right. Are there questions of council to the staff or applicant regarding the application? Elise?
I'm just curious, if we went with alternative A, what budget year that item would fall in?
When would it be paid back? Yeah. I see. When would the purchase occur? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
It would probably depend on whether the applicant goes right into filing documents and building. If so, it could fall in this year or potentially next year. And then the payback through the leases would be over a series of years in terms of the leases with Big O and Quick Lube.
Thank you.
Would you like me to, sorry, I don't want to speak out of turn. Would you like me to sort of provide some information on when we think more than likely we would construct?
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's unrealistic that it's impossible, actually, that we would finish construction this year. So I think it would be possible for you to include it in next year. I'm just thinking out loud because we wouldn't. The site and the paving work in large measure probably wouldn't occur until it gets warm enough in the spring. Let's call that, if we're lucky, April. And so I think we've missed asphalt work and probably concrete work for this work until next spring. Or, during the winter, but into 2021. I'm sorry, Mayor, cut you off.
So it would be a 2021 transaction.
I would guess. I mean, we'd probably try to break ground in November, but, the costs of doing a lot, this site's got a lot of concrete. And so, doing that throughout the winter has its challenges and it gets more costly. And so certainly asphalt, which I think would be the parking spaces more than likely, that would happen in the spring.
Okay. Any additional questions of council to the applicant or staff regarding ordinance number 13? Hearing none,
Oh, no, hey, I had my hand up.
Looks like Ryan.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Glenn. Ryan, I didn't see you.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm here. James, are there other examples where we've purchased the easement like this on other properties? I don't know if I've missed them or can't think of one exactly.
You know, I can't.
Is it a common thing that we do as a town?
No, it's not a common thing. I would say I can't really think of a similar example. I think in this case, you know, staff sees an opportunity to clean up a pretty significant problem that we've had over time. And then we've tried to come up with a solution to get paid back for that. And so we've been working with the businesses, but I can't give you another good example of where we've done this exact thing.
David?
Yeah, I'm kind of hung up on that as well. I mean, I'm appreciative of, you know, all the work that's gone into investigating options, and the application seems really good otherwise, but the expenditure of $75,000 and the way that the language is written there in the packet, it talks about potential lease, they may be willing to potentially lease and things like that. I can see the potential for us to perhaps spend the money and not lease the parking spaces. We'll be taking on the obligation to purchase the land. I don't know why we would take that risk on in the environment that we're in right now. I have a hard time seeing that because I just don't think this is a problem for the town to solve. This seems to be between the businesses that are over there on those streets. So that's where I'm sitting right now on this.
If I may just respond to that a little bit, you know, I don't think it's unprecedented for a local government to step in and provide assistance, particularly when it's going to become public land, to help solve a traffic-related issue or, you know, an infrastructure issue that may or may not have been created by the town. I mean, I think the issue we have here is that we have two businesses that are highly successful in town and spilling out, since they are auto-oriented businesses very specifically, spilling out into, you know, the rights of way. And so, you know, while there may be some unknowns on that, I think, you know, it seems to me these businesses, they know they need the spaces, and they know they need to solve that problem, because otherwise they're going to be losing business at the end of the day. And so, you know, they were pretty forthcoming on their willingness. But you know, I think, you know, while I can't think of a specific example, you know, we do have, you know, even over at the CDC property across the street, there is a public and private partnership essentially that's occurring over there in the name of economic development, where we will be assuming the costs of street improvements and parking improvements and things like that, as well as building the park, of course. So that may not be an exact, you know, sort of parallel. I think it still represents what we're doing to spur on economic development. You know, another example I can think of, you know, just very relevant, you know, the public paying for items that might help businesses. You know, the businesses didn't pay for the concrete blocks that got placed out in front of those businesses to put in expanded seating areas. That was something we did to respond and help out our local commerce. And so, you know, those are just a couple things that I can think of that, you know, the local government necessarily plays a role in some of these, even if it at times seems or feels like it's a little cloudy, like, hey, you know, it's not necessarily our issue. True, but, you know, it does become public right of way at the end of the day, and will be in the public's ownership, and have a long-term view, with regard to this underpass that could happen, at some point too. So, hope that helps a little bit.
James, I had a quick question. Is does Southside Drive align with extended Midland Avenue? I didn't see a bigger context map there, but is that
It does, yeah, it aligns well with Midland Avenue, so there would be a good extension there for an underpass.
I guess the
Mayor,
second question.
I think
the
Glenn
second
had his
question-
hand up, and I don't think you saw him over there in the corner.
Okay, Glenn, go ahead.
So I know I brought up the expenditure money, and after a conversation with Ryan, like, I think I could stomach that. The one thing I just heard from the applicant was the presumably asphalt. So I guess, are we guaranteed that it's going to be concrete, asphalt? I would hate to see this be pull-in parking that is gravel. So like I can get past us expending the money to buy the right of way just for, part of our deals could be look out 5-10 years down the road. Hey, this could be important for the underpass. But I would really like to see that we nail down what kind of servicing we're going to be purchasing or putting in those parking spots. Because it's going to be gravel like this now, really what are
The cost estimate that includes the 54,000 is for asphalt surface.
And is that like in part of this application that it has to be built that way?
We can add that as language if needed, sure. With the condition that you have from the document that Pam sent out today, it references the cost estimate, which includes the asphalt. So we can more specifically say it needs to be asphalt.
I mean, as long as it's not gravel.
Yeah, my thoughts about this were initially, why is the town chipping in $75,000 if the belief is that there's a sufficient rental income stream to be generated from leasing these parking spaces to Big O and Quick Lube? So if there's sufficient money to retire this $75,000 with some kind of reasonable payback period, why doesn't the applicant do that? Why does the town have to put this up? Why doesn't the applicant just rent these spaces directly, and it's a 100% private sector enterprise? Offsetting that is the benefit that we venture $75,000, we realize the income, and then we end up owning the asset at the end of the day. We end up owning those parking spaces, we own the right of way, and if we ever do a underpass and a connection, it just gives us more sort of freedom in terms of design for those roadways. So I guess my take on it is that this is probably not an unreasonable venture. If we get our money back and then we end up owning land, that sounds like it sounds a little weird. I mean, it's a little bit outside the base paths for what municipal government might normally do, but the times are weird also. So I guess I would be amenable to doing option A, just if for nothing else, that we end up controlling that right away and we can control the future over there a little bit better. But there certainly is a scenario where you say, hey, this is a private sector problem here. Let's let Mr. Belkin just rent that land to those guys, collect the money, and off we go. But then we may be, if we ever do achieve an underpass, we would have a bundle of problems probably down the road with right-of-way issues. So, at any rate, there's some thoughts. Jeff, did you have your hand up there?
Quick question, John and James, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it the case that if there were to be head-in parking constructed, it would require the use and part of existing town right of way, which is what would preclude the developer from doing this on their own. Is that correct?
Yeah, a portion of it would be current town right-of-way, in addition to the strip of land that we would buy for the right-of-way.
Bill, we can't hear you. Can you, we can't hear.
Mayor, we can't hear you. You must have lost your Zoom audio there. Did we lose the call?
Shoot.
Must be us again. Can you hear?
Can someone else speak?
Yeah, well, Jeff is speaking and Bill's speaking and we can't hear it all.
I can hear them, but James, I couldn't, he got cut off.
Right, so it's the Zoom one again.
Can they hear you?
I haven't spoken,
Can,
but yes.
can you try to speak to them and tell them we can't hear them here
Yeah.
at the hall?
Yeah.
Recall.
Oh, there we go.
More than 20 participants in the meeting.
So we're back. Can you hear us?
Okay, good.
Thanks.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, John, you have the floor. You were explaining.
Yeah, I'll just go quick because I know you guys have a long night. Yeah, Yancey came up with the idea, and really pitched it to myself and James. It helps solve parking issues over there, and the way, if you think about it as configured, I think it's going to work well for you in the future with the underpass, and we can, build it. Just effectively, you're paying for 780 square feet, and your alternative A, which I think makes sense, and it allows us to build it while we're there, developing the site. It really, frankly, makes a lot of sense. I have seen examples. I was the town attorney in Crested Butte for 15 years, and we had done a number of transactions similar to this in Crested Butte. Of course, in some of the property downtown was very expensive. I can think of a couple parcels where the town paid in excess of $1.5 million. So for parking, but yeah, I think this will be really helpful for the businesses and also the people driving around over there. Even if we didn't put a car wash in, even if there was a gas station, which is a permitted use over there, or any other use. Yeah, so I don't know what the design is for the underpass and how that's going to look, but I imagine that you're going to have different turning lanes over there, and this will end up being pretty important.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's ever contemplated to be a full movement intersection. It's just an underpass, so.
Right.
Elise, you had your hand up?
I think Ryan might have been first.
Okay, Ryan. Ryan yields to Elise. Go ahead.
So further to David's point about the expense, I would love if Ryan or Christy could weigh in on how this would play into the budget for next year, since obviously this is not an expense that we saw coming.
I think it would just be something that we would add in, whether it come from the general fund or restricted funds. We just have to look at that, and then with the expectation that it get paid back over time for those proportionate shares that were contemplated in it. We have some flexibility either way.
Thank you.
What is our net yield expense once we account for the leases and everything? Maybe that can clarify.
I'm sorry, you kind of cut out. I didn't hear you, Glenn.
So what is our actual expense once we recuperate leasing the properties? What's our dollar?
What we were looking at leasing 7 spaces to both Big O and Quick Lube at $250 a month. After 6 years, I think we were looking at like $17,000. And Big O and Quick Lube also indicated that they were willing to lease more spaces if we would allow them to. So that could be a possibility where we could recoup more and get to our total cost if we wanted to.
So we're 17 grand out of pocket?
Yeah.
Like I said, we could reduce that. When we were discussing, we thought we should, have some the town should have some skin in the game, and not, part of it was that we didn't want to have a total reliance with Big O and Quick Lube that forever and ever those spaces were going to be there, because eventually we'd like to have the underpass there. And the other thing is we thought the other 7 spaces could be used by other folks in the neighborhood, because these spaces that are going to be leased will have a sign on them that they're for Big O and for Quick Lube. So, you could arrange it differently and try to have a net zero. But I guess we were kind of thinking that we thought the town should have some skin in the game, but that was kind of our take.
I could live with 17 grand.
Additional questions, comments? Brian Slack, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think Susan just answered it. Why we were only trying to recoup 3/4 of the cost. I mean, to me, I would feel better about it if we were just trying to get the cost recouped. If you charge $300 a space for 10 years or $300 each, we just get closer to covering our costs. I understand the buying of the right of way more now, but I just wondered why we weren't trying to completely zero it out, and I think Susan explained it. Just trying to be a good partner.
Okay, David Knight.
What's our confidence level in these that are actually going to get leased, and if they're not, is there any mechanism by which we can prevent people, from using it without paying for it? I'm still hung up on, I know you can't sign a lease, it's part of this process, I get that, but just want to see what your guys' thoughts are there.
Well, when we had conversations with Big O and Quick Lube, they were interested in leasing as many spaces as they could get. So, generally from their indications, we're pretty confident that they're going to want to lease the spaces, and even more if they could get them. Obviously, there's no guarantee to that, but those spaces are pretty critical to their business and the way they operate it. So they seem very willing to play ball with us.
We could defense ourselves if we were concerned about that by taking the land under option and then signing the purchase agreement and purchasing the land once we had lease agreements in place from Big O and Quick Lube. If we had real concerns or hesitation about their willingness to rent. So that's available to us. I don't know, Jeff is pulling hair out of his head over there, so.
Well, I think if council were to approve with alternative A, it could also direct staff to go ahead and secure some of those, or attempt to secure some leases with those businesses in the meantime. And I guess, you know, we could think through, okay, what would be the tools to ensure that there's not some other use of these parking spaces that would
Yeah, fair enough.
would be protecting against with respect to those guys. So I mean that's some direction that council could give staff is to work on securing that arrangement with those parties on approval with all.
Yeah. Ryan Mahoney, is that you?
I'm nodding.
Oh, I thought you had your hand up for.
No.
Okay.
Just nodding and agreeing with Jeff.
Anyone else? Ryan?
Sorry to continue beating this. How do we come up with $250? Do we get $350, $50 a space? I mean, that would help us recoup almost all the costs in 10 years or even more.
We could talk to them about it. We were trying to stay reasonable because they're good basalt businesses, and you know currently they use the space out there for no cost. So we were trying to be reasonable. You know, there could be the possibility that we could charge more. We could talk to them about it.
Yeah, just wondering. Just trying to make it more palatable for everyone.
I mean, just food for thought for everybody. If you're to pay $250, that's $1,750 extra a month. It's awful. Like Big O is all of a sudden paying pretty hefty business expense.
No, I believe it's $250 for 7 spots.
Yeah.
Flat.
Yeah.
7?
For
Yeah,
7
$250
spots.
for all 7 spots.
All 7.
So it's a good deal.
It's a good deal.
That is a really good deal.
Okay. Is there anyone that would like to venture a motion? I think the elements of this would be to approve the ordinance on second reading, subject to option A as possibly amended to reflect Glenn's comments or others to try to adjust the rental rate to achieve 100% reimbursement to the town. That's sort of option A1. So they seem to be the two ideas on the table. But at any rate, just I'm not making a motion here, but that seems to be the scope of what we've been talking about. So anyway, interested in making a motion, see if that would fly. Ryan Slack, sir.
Let me get back to that page, sorry. I would make the motion. I want to just say as amended, but I can't. Sorry. My iPad's going crazy. I know it's funny, huh, Eagle? Okay, I motion the town council adopt ordinance number 13, series of 2020 on second reading with option A1, where we ask to charge $350 a spot, or $350 for each of the 7 spots, so we can recoup most of the money for the right-of-way. I don't even know if that was right.
Thank you. That's clear. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second that.
Who is that?
Glenn.
Glenn, okay. It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion on the motion?
And Ryan,
None.
I'm sorry, Mayor. And Ryan, as part of your motion, does that incorporate the adjustments to the conditions that Pam sent out today?
Yeah, I believe so. Whatever was in A, the 10-year lease period.
Yeah, but there were two other minor adjustments. One recognizing that we have sufficient water, which is kind of a state requirement that we wanted in the ordinance. And then an adjustment to condition number 21 about the, okay. Thank you.
As revised by the condition adjustments. I'll add that, sorry.
And Glenn, you second that as
Yeah.
as amended? Okay, then
Yeah.
that's what's on the table. Is there discussion on this motion? Gary?
My concern, I totally, support Ryan's increase in cost. My biggest concern on this is how to enforce, you know, the fact is, how about if they say, no, we're not gonna lease it, and then they're just gonna use it? So that's my concern on this one, is just that, you know, the reality is if they don't lease it, they're gonna use it. And, I just wanna see how we can make sure that, you know, we're building this, they're gonna use it, they should pay for it. I totally agree with that, because we're doing them a huge service, because they have cars all over the place. And so, I don't know if that's for Ryan or Jeff or somebody.
We have lots of river pigs still in our inventory, so if they don't pay, those pigs could show up very quickly, and there wouldn't be any parking out there. I assure you, we have means to prevent from parking happening there.
Could I ask a quick question? I'm sorry, James, you mentioned something about having adequate water. Where is that in here?
It's in the adjusted conditions that I sent you. It's just a finding. In some of our prior approvals, we've included that based on some case law that was out there. We've kind of stopped doing it, but we would like to kind of reinforce that.
And what does it read again, James? I'm sorry, where is it?
It references state statutes, and it's a finding that was in the revised conditions that I sent you this afternoon.
It just basically says the town council finds and determines pursuant to CRS 2920-301 that there is adequate water supply. You will want that finding.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay, I didn't know, because I was like, oh, the bank's not gonna know if we don't have enough water to have a car
No,
wash. Okay.
it's a good comment.
We're saying there is enough water supply in our system to serve you.
Yep, and we'll pay for it. Okay, thank you.
So point of order here, because we're having like a discussion, you know, after a motion's on the floor. Can we go back and finish that discussion and then have a motion? If Glenn and Ryan are willing, or?
Yeah, this is discussion on the motion, so,
Okay.
it's fair game, but if you have.
Fair game, okay. Yeah.
So this is typically a time where people indicate what their leanings are, what their concerns are with the motion. You know, they're tipping their hand a little bit about how they see this thing.
Okay, I bet.
I guess my one question, following up on Gary's point, is there a way to structure this through Ryan and Jeff of, we have to have the lease agreement before we finalize the purchase and construction of the lot? Or is that getting too far in the weeds, Jeff?
I suppose it could be conditioned that way. I guess the problem is trying to unwind things if there's some problem with communication. I do think there are tools of the town to limit the use of these spaces in the event that there are some problems getting the businesses to come to the table and reach a final agreement on this. It would get more complicated, I guess, if there was the town's purchase upon the lease agreements with each of the businesses. But it would just be more difficult to unwind in the event that there's an issue with that. But
just an idea that, you know, it is possible that, you know, between, say, the time of purchase and prior to construction, we could secure those. I know those timelines are a little unknown and maybe even somewhat simultaneous, but, you know, I think we can we can perhaps work on that. Maybe that's a little safer bet.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the motion, and this may be unreasonably vague, but maybe if the staff was comfortable with it, the motion could simply say that we approve this on second reading, and the town elects to proceed with option A, subject to a understanding that the parking spaces will be rented, and then we basically turn this over to the staff to figure out how to make that provision of the council's approval basically enforceable. I mean, what I was recommending earlier, not recommending, but offering up, and it's a lot of paperwork and lawyering, but we could take this land under options. We sign an option agreement, and the option agreement says that we purchase upon the receipt of lease agreements from Big O and Basalt Quick Lube. And that completely protects the town. We're not exposed. We're not spending $75,000 and then having unrentable spaces or having these guys go out of business and then we're left holding the bag here. We don't close until we have lease agreements in place. That's not an unusual business arrangement.
I heard a couple things there, and I think they're just to kind of lay this out again. I think the motion that's on the table is with option A, and it could be, I guess, amended such that it's to approve with option A as with the language circulated by Pam as the alternative A today, and then either on the condition that town staff pursue leases of those spaces at a rate that would allow the town to offset its costs of purchase, and then that would be kind of one option. If there's a specific condition on closing, no closing unless there is a lease of the spaces, my concern is that then we're left with a site plan that's being approved that wouldn't sync up with that ownership arrangement, because
that's not optimal.
The applicant's not going to construct these parking spaces for public use. They'd have to come back in with an alternative parallel parking arrangement on the street. So that's part of the problem with just conditioning it. I would see just that unwinding and having to come back and leave it.
I'm trying to create this in real time, but it seems like we can just have staff bring it back to the town council before building permit if we're not able to come up with the lease agreements that work, and we bring it back. We have an authorization in here that allows the TRC to make minor modifications to the site plan. So, if we're not able to strike a deal, I think through that administrative process, we could approve a parallel parking situation instead of the head-in parking.
Well, that sounds pretty good. That sounds like a time not there if TRC could, review this and, I don't know what the motion would be. It would be that we approve it subject to successful completion of this agreement with the two adjoining commercial enterprises there. And if for any reason we're not successful, then this comes back to council.
Just one thing, if I may, Mr. Mayor. I mean, the one thing is, you're not, I assume, conditioning the whole approval on that.
Correct.
Because the problem with that is that creates a major problem for me.
No, I think there would be, as the lawyers would say, it would be severable. We basically are approving the car wash. Our action would be strictly limited to the disposition of the parking areas.
Got it. The one thing I would point out too is by giving that 780 feet, we're moving all of the site work to the east. and we're using up every bit of space we have to get all the turn lanes. If we could move the site to the west and not give that 708 feet, it would cost us less money and we'd have a lot more space. So my point is, by giving the town this space, which we're offering, which we like, if you like it, is we can make it work, but it's not as ideal. I mean, we'd rather, in many ways, not give it away, but we also recognize the fact that 708 feet is going to help solve a parking issue for everybody else, all of the neighborhood. Does that make sense? So if you decided not to do it, we would probably want to shift everything to the west. Whatever number of feet, a couple feet.
Okay, let's get back to council here. We have a motion and a second on the table. This is discussion. Any further discussion on the motion?
Should we have a
Everybody understand the motion?
Yeah, I was gonna say, should we have a clarification of the motion?
Yes.
Please.
Yes, please.
My understanding of the motion was to approve the ordinance with alternative A as that language was presented in council today, with the direction of pursuing a lease amount of $350 instead of $250 if possible. Is that how you intended it, Ryan?
Yes.
That's how I interpreted it.
Okay. That's the motion. David?
Are we touching anything with pursuing other parking in a parallel way with, saying it's going to be parallel on the street?
I don't think that's part of this motion.
Okay.
Okay. Hearing no further discussion, Pam, please call the roll.
Okay. Let's begin with Gary Tenenbaum,
Yes.
thank you. David Knight,
No.
Glenn Drummond,
Yes.
Elise Hoddle,
Yes.
Ryan Slack,
Yes.
and Bill Kane.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-1.
All right. Thank you, guys. That was easy.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. We are up to item number B, public hearing, second reading of ordinance number 14, series of 2020, an ordinance of the town council approving an amendment to the lease agreement with the Arts Campus at Willits to CAW. Jeff?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This is the second reading for this ordinance. Upon approval for the Takah site to develop that property, there was authorization to amend the plat for the site to vacate certain portions of the right-of-way there that would then be included into that tract. That has been done and that plat's been recorded, so now there just needs to be a corresponding amendment to the lease of between the town and Takah. The town owns this property and leases it to Takah pursuant to a 99-year lease. So this is just a correction to the legal description in the lease to make sure that what the Takah is leasing syncs up with what's on paper on the plat.
Okay. Sounds pretty pro forma. Are there questions of Mr. Conklin by council? Hearing none. This is a ordinance and it's a public hearing and second reading. So I'll have to open the public hearing at this point at 12 minutes after 8 p.m. So Susan, if you would kind of watch the clock there and see if any public comment about this.
Sure. So far, we don't have any public comment. Please text 970-987-7010 with your name and phone number, or planning@basalt.net. But we do have Ryan Honey from Takah here that would like to say a couple words during the public comment portion of this discussion.
Okay. Are you gonna call him?
He's right here.
Oh, he's on already.
Yeah.
Hey,
Hello,
Ryan.
Mr. Mayor and
How are
council
you?
members. Thank you. I'm great. Great to see you all in this Zoom format. Yeah, we're thrilled to be moving forward with construction and this partnership between the town and Takawa. We will look forward to opening the building and getting back to doing what we do. We also appreciate all the efforts to allow us to continue programming in a socially distant world as we move through this. So our partnership with the town continues, and we're grateful for all the efforts over the years to make that a reality. If any council members or staff want to walk the parcel at any point during the construction process, please let me know. I'm happy to take you on a hard hat tour as we build the building. If there's any questions about the issue at hand, I think Jeff and I can speak to them, but just know we're grateful for the ongoing efforts of the town.
Excellent. Do you need any help digging the foundations out there? We've got 7 volunteers here.
Yeah, I'll see you there tomorrow morning, 7 a.m.
Great. All right. Well, thank you for those comments.
Thank you.
Susan, do we have anybody call in with any
No, we don't
public
have
comment?
anyone else texting or calling or indicating that they wanted to talk, so I think we're good.
All right. Hearing no, I will close the public hearing at 8:15 and ask if there is a motion. If we have a counselor willing to make a motion to approve ordinance number 14 of 2020.
Mayor, I move that the town council adopt ordinance number 14, series of 2020, on second reading.
Second.
Second.
Okay, been moved and seconded. Pam, please call the roll.
Absolutely. Sheets here, sorry. Okay, let's begin with Glenn Drummond.
You're on mute, Glenn.
Glenn, are you on?
I've had yes.
Thank you, Glenn. Ryan Slack,
Yes.
Bill Kane,
Yes.
Terry Tenenbaum,
Yes.
David Knight,
Yes.
Uh-oh. With no Zoom.
Now, there are 19 participants in the meeting.
Have you guys tried that one?
Yeah, I've heard of that one. That one's good.
No, it's not. We use GoTo all the time, guys, and it's not as comprehensive as the Zoom thing. Google is worse. WebEx seems to work.
Are you back? Okay, we're back.
We're back.
there he is, yes. Okay. Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, thank you. Our order of business is resolution number 23, series of 2020. This is a resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Basalt, Colorado, approving the Arbany Park Pool Project initial phasing plan and directing town staff to request bids for construction. Susan Philp.
Okay, it's Susan Phelp
And Mayor,
Yes.
Mayor Elise Hoddle will be recusing herself again.
Ah, okay.
So I will call back in later.
Okay, great.
Okay, so this is Susan Phelp and team, and everyone who's joining me from Post and staff. If you guys want to go ahead and put your video on, if you're using your video. And so I just want to acknowledge that from Post, I have Cindy Bruce, the chair, Jason Groves, Paul Hiltz on the phone, and then from staff, we have Brian Pacente, who's the recreation director, and Boyd Beerbaum is listening. He's really here for if you have questions on the next item, which is the water line. And then we also have Giles Thornley from Connect One Design, who is our landscape architect on this project. So I was really glad that Post members could join us. Just want to take 1 second to kind of regroup about what we're doing in terms of the Albany Park pool, and because it really is a fun project that we're doing. This is the overall site plan that is showing the existing pool, which is where your number 1 and 2 and 3 is, and is showing the new robot pool, which is where 5 and 16 is. It's showing the PV panels that you see on the existing building, which is shown as like number 14. It's showing a lot more shade, showing a pavilion building in future phases, which we don't know exactly what's going to be on the pavilion building yet, but we are definitely going to move the existing solar PV onto that roof. We may put restrooms, definitely will put restrooms for Albany Park in there. There's still some discussion about what's happening with the concessions, et cetera. I have a feeling that while I was doing this, let me just get to the, James, I can't move my cursor here. Just let me get to the top here. So what we shared with you on the June 9th, we had a presentation with Post and with Giles, and we kind of highlighted some of the really cool features of the Albany pool, with the robot pool. Here we see a different viewpoint of it. One of the things that happened over the life of the plan was that we really decided to beautify the women's and the men's locker rooms. Here you see another picture of the pool. In future phases, we have a pavilion building. Originally, we were talking about potentially changing the entrance to the pool, and that really looks like it may not be possible in this location itself because of some pool rules, but we definitely use it to have restrooms for the Albany Park itself and to store basketballs, baseballs and stuff for use of the pool. One of the future phases, we have the family-friendly restrooms. One of the things that we noted at the last meeting was that we were kind of pushing those away from being built in the initial phase into a future phase. And then, here's are just additional versions of the pool. This resolution, and there's a lot in your packet, and so I'm not going to go over everything that's in your packet. I'm assuming that the council was able to review it. Last time I spent quite a bit of time going over the phasing plan. What the resolution is doing is approving going to bid for the projects that we list under 2020 and 2021. So we're proposing to do the locker room renovations. We're proposing to do the PV panels on the changing room roof, shade, mechanical room upgrades, bringing things into compliance, the new water line, that's the next item, the robot pool, the ADA ramp into the main pool, and replastering, refurnishing, a new fence around the robot pool. And then it's kind of in number one of the council actions, it's generally approving the phasing plan for all 4 years, but it's kind of stronger language was added this time, kind of recognizing that in these outlining liar years, particularly that depending on the bids that we get, additional input from the public, that these items might change over time. I'm gonna stop sharing. I can go over the funding that we have in here in more detail if the council would like me to. But basically, we had set out pretty consistent with the existing capital improvement plan that the council adopted back in December, that's kind of allocating different projects totaling about $2.4 million. You know, Toni Kronberg in her introductory comments during the citizen comments brought up some points. A couple of them I would like to address. And
Are we gonna, sorry to interrupt, but are we gonna hear public comment on this?
I didn't think that we were going to hear additional public comment during this item.
Fire away.
I think one of the 4 areas that Post really concentrated on is one, kind of the climate action challenge that we have, and a lot of the recommendations that we're including here were to address climate action and greenhouse gas emission reduction. 2 was really to lower operation costs, not only in terms of utility bills, but also in terms of staff time. 3 was just that the pool, the area that we have for the Albany pool isn't infinite. We have a very small space that we're trying to fit everything in. And 4 is that we're not planning on going out to bond, that we were planning on doing these improvements within the budget that we have. And as you know, we're using primarily restricted funds, the 1% sales tax. And so one of the interesting things that we learned from the Let's Talk Basalt webpage that we had 58 respondents on that Let's Talk Basalt and 2 emails. And we did revise kind of the plan that we presented to you at the June 9th meeting because of some of the things we learned. But one of the interesting things that came out of that was there was a concern by our residents that we not increase the pool fees. And one of the ways that we can do that is to keep operation costs down to kind of a manageable level. So when we get into concepts like the hot tub and the warming pool, we included information that was provided by Brian about the monthly emptying of the hot tub and cleaning the hot tub that you'd have to do to keep that sanitary and safe. We did discuss at the post meeting, at the last post meeting, we were asked to ratify the action that they had taken previously, which the post committee voted to ratify its prior action, but they also concentrated on a couple different areas. One of those was the discussion about the 2-foot depth areas in the pool and whether those should be increased to 3 feet. I would like to have the post members maybe chime in on that because they felt pretty strongly about not deepening the robot pool, which is really intended for small tykes and children, and not deepening that to 3 feet. And also on the larger pool, not creating a 3-foot area that would require us breaking the shell of the pool and going out into the deck. And then the other thing that the post committee kind of concentrated on was the warming pool in the hot tub, and just kind of coming that they were pretty firm that, that we not include that in our initial phasing. We're showing it on the site plan. We discussed whether we would hold off. That's why we held the meeting on July 1st. We talked about doing some more citizen input on those two items, but Post really felt that we had solid reasons for making the decisions that we were recommending to the town council. So instead, what we were proposing to do is to do, we didn't want to confuse the town council, confuse the public while the town council's kind of looking at this initial phase by having a survey out. But if the town council approves this resolution, we were planning on this week doing another survey, and that survey is really concentrating on two things. It's really has to do with family changing rooms and the concessions. So with that, I think I would just ask Cindy, Jason, and to Paul to maybe add a couple comments. Start with you, Cindy.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to, again, thank Connect One and their partners, because I feel that with all the questions we had and the town had, the town folks, that they've been very responsive to all the questions, and we appreciate that. And as Susan said, we felt really strongly that it was Post's duty, our job, to make what we thought were the tough decisions regarding particularly the hot tub, due to the space constraints and particularly our budget constraint as well. We really want to stay within a reasonable budget so that we don't have to raise any costs of fees to get into the pool for the town. We also wanted to keep the open space around the pool by adding shade and keeping the space for the people. And then we thought the updates to the kiddie pool were just really perfect for what the kids need. We wanted to maintain the depth of 2 feet, and then also having the zero entry, the very shallow pop jets, so the kids would be comfortable in the water and then move into the big pool when they could. And then finally, we wanted to not break into that shell of the pool, because as Brian has mentioned to us, it's a terrific shell, and so we're gonna try and again keep within our budget, and so we didn't want to break that shell either. So I think those are all my comments for now. Thank you.
Jason, do you want to add? You're on mute, by the way.
Who's up, Susan?
Jason was going to add a couple comments.
Okay.
Jason Groves. Jason, we can't hear you for some reason.
We gotta unmute.
Maybe while we're waiting, want to try again?
Hey, Jason, you gotta unmute. It says you got your unmute button there on the lower part of the screen.
My computer did it. You got to plug in a microphone.
You're on there. Can you try again? Nope. Hey, Paul, do you want to unmute yourself and add any comments, and then we'll try Jason one more time?
Yeah, can you hear me, Susan?
Yeah, I can.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think Cindy covered most of it. I would just say thank you to Connect One. It's been a great collaborative effort. I think they went out of their way to be as inclusive as possible in gathering public comment and melding that with the practicalities of the space that exists there and the budget that we have to work with. They've done an excellent job, as has Brian with his input. And, yeah, it's been very inclusive, and I urge the council to move forward with this. Thanks.
Jason, maybe you can just call in with your comments. Can you hear me? So maybe we lost Jason.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. That's perfect.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I use my phone to call in. My computer audio is not working for some reason. Yeah, I think what Paul and Cindy have said hits the nail on the head. I do want to emphasize, though, that after our sort of brief procedural pause that we had over since the past meeting, that we did take a hard look at this post-it, and we really mulled the comments and concerns raised by Ms. Kronberg over and gave those a lot of consideration and discussion. And so we stand by our initial decision, and I think it's time we move forward.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
And Giles or Brian, anything that you think we should add to what we indicated? So I don't see anything from them. So, you know, we're available for questions, and we have, you know, we're asking you to approve the resolution. Uh-oh.
I don't have any questions, but I have comment. Being involved in this process before with all the school committee, we're never going to make anybody happy. We're never going to make 100% of people happy, but I think we've nailed 75%. With seeing letters of support that everybody's seen, we've done as much as we can do as far as our climate change, like what we want to accomplish. Those aspects, I think it's a good plan. And I encourage council.
Great. If there are no further questions, I would ask to see if there is a motion to approve resolution number 23, series of 2020, to approve the first phase of Albany Park pool improvements. And we're very pleased to see the shade sails are like part of phase one here. Climate change, that's pretty significant addition. So anybody willing to make a motion?
Mayor, I move the town council approve resolution number 23, series 2020.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded. Pam, please, do we need a roll call or a voice vote?
Roll call.
Roll call?
Yes, roll call for a resolution.
Thank you.
Okay. Let us begin with Elise Hoddle.
Recused.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do that every time, don't I? I'm so sorry. David Knight?
Yes.
Thank you. Bill Kane?
Yes.
Gary Tenenbaum?
Yes.
Glenn Drummond?
Yes.
Ryan Slack?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for all the work. Giles, always good to see you, and great work on this. And thanks to everybody on post for the lots of hours and tender loving care you give in our little pool out there. So really appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank you, guys. Our next order of business is the first reading on ordinance number 15. It's an ordinance of the town of Basalt, Colorado, approving an easement agreement with the Roaring Fork School District, RE number 1, RE-1. Jeff and Susan will explain.
Okay, well, we also have Boyd Beerbaum on this one also from Public Works, and this is an easement agreement for the new water line for the Albany pool, and the existing alignment, the existing line's 3/4 inch. You see in the packet how long it takes to fill the pool with that, and up until the last couple of years, it was rarely filled. The existing alignment doesn't work just because of the amount of impact that we'd have on the existing neighbors and the cost of the deconstruction that we'd have to do to get to an adequate water line. So there was a team of Boyd Beerbaum from Public Works and James Lint, and Chris Lehrman from SGM, who looked at several different alignments, and they picked the one with the school. We've been in discussions with the school on kind of the details of that easement agreement, and that is what is in front of you. We're actually out to bid on the water line, hoping to bring at second reading the contracts for that. We have some timing issues with the school district in terms of wanting to be less impactful as possible on their operations. So Boyd is here just because there was a question about why we were going to the 8-inch water line, and that's why Boyd is here. There is a hydrant in this location, so at a minimum, it needs to be the 6-inch line, and then the other reason is that we're really kind of trying to build a loop system within the town. But if you have any other questions on that, you can ask Boyd. Jeff worked on the particulars with the attorney from the school district. I don't know, Jeff, if you want to add anything else.
Just a few quick things. It's a pretty straightforward easement agreement, and the school district has approved the agreement substantially in this form, and it's being approved by ordinance. So of course it'll be 2 readings, and we'll have a public hearing on that.
Boyd, do you want to add anything?
No, the reason we went with our the 8-inch size is that the fire department wanted a hydrant put in because of probably future development and expansion and just better fire protection. And the American Water Works Association requires the minimum of a 6-inch line on a fire hydrant, and we decided to go with an 8 because at this point, between a 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8-inch line, the cost is minimal. The main cost is in the excavation, so we decided to go with an 8-inch line with future hopes of looping that line to Park Avenue and offering better water quality and more volume. So we're kind of looking toward the future, and it's not going to be that much more of an expense.
That's a big line. So, great. Are there any questions of council to either Susan or Jeff or Boyd? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve ordinance number 15 on first reading?
Mayor, I move the town council approve ordinance number 15, series of 2020 on first reading and set public hearing and second reading for July 28th, 2020.
Thank you very much.
Second.
Okay, been moved in second. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, please call the roll, Pam.
Okay. Will do. Let's begin with David Knight,
Yes.
Glenn Drummond,
Yes.
Bill Kane,
Yes.
Barry Tenenbaum,
Yes.
Elise Hoddle,
Yes.
Ryan Slack.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. I think that concludes our normal agenda business. At this point in the meeting, Pam, you might want to take over and explain procedurally what we're going to do. We're going to transition to an executive session. So I don't know if we want to adjourn, or Jeff, maybe you could advise, do we adjourn after we come out of executive session? How do we go about this?
Well, I think we would just briefly return to the regular session just to declare the meeting adjourned. Pam, how are we handling this from a Zoom perspective?
So once we shut down the broadcast section, the only thing we can do is record audio. We won't be able to come back into the meeting to rebroadcast or anything. We can record with a small separate recorder, which we have set up in the room, ready to go. If it's something that we should be recording, I don't know if this is a privileged attorney-client communication. If it is, then we will shut down all communications after you enter executive session.
It will be privileged, so once we enter executive session, there'll be a few announcements, and then the recorder will be turned off, and then we'll turn it back on, and then we will conclude.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll go in there now, and we'll start shutting down the system. Of course, they need a motion, I'm sorry.
Yes, for a motion to go into executive session. Do you want me to read it, Jeff, or do you want to read the purpose for executive session?
Whoever makes the motion should read the.
Okay, so anybody's got it in front of them can read the suggested motion.
Mayor, I move that the town council enter executive session for a conference with our attorney for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions in accordance with CRS 246402-4B, more specifically to discuss case number 2016 CV 30322, Theodore Guy versus Town of Basalt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye, or do you need a roll call?
We can take a voice vote. We just need 2/3 approval to go into the executive session.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes unanimously.
Okay, I'll go in, we'll start shutting down, we'll give you the heads up in a minute.
Okay.